Rain hammered against the warehouse windows like bullets. Isabella Sinclair stood alone in the darkness, phone trembling in her hand as her husband's voice crackled through the speaker, begging, screaming, promising her everything he'd already destroyed. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. Lorenzo Vasilev emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable, a gun resting casually against his thigh. This was the moment. The choice between the woman she used to be and the monster she was about to become. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and rage and 3 years of suffocated dreams, Isabella already knew which version would walk out of this warehouse alive. Before we begin, I want to invite you to follow this story until the very end. If you enjoy it, please hit the like button and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's dive in. Eat. The Volkov Global Annual Christmas Gala looked like someone had vomited gold and crystal all over a ballroom and called it elegance. Isabella Sinclair stood near the champagne tower, emerald satin clinging to her ribs, watching couples drift past in clouds of expensive perfume and cheaper lies. Her husband was 47 minutes late. She checked her phone again. Nothing. Around her, executives laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Their wives smiled with teeth that cost more than most people's cars. Everything glittered. Everything lied. Isabella's reflection stared back from a nearby mirror. Dark hair swept into an elegant knot, makeup flawless, expression carefully blank. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be. The perfect corporate wife. Her phone buzzed. Something came up with work. Sorry, Isa. The words sat on the screen like insects. She read them 3 times, feeling something cold and sharp settle behind her sternum. Adrian never called her Isa anymore. That nickname belonged to a version of their marriage that had died months ago, probably around the time he stopped looking at her during conversations. Her thumb hovered over the reply box. What was she supposed to say? It's fine, I understand. Come home soon? Instead, she opened the location-sharing app they'd installed 2 years ago after Adrian's car got stolen. For safety, he'd said. So we always know where each other is. The blue dot that represented her husband pulsed on the screen. Not at the office, not stuck in holiday traffic on the bridge. Adrian Mercer was at an apartment complex in Chelsea, 30 blocks from anything resembling work. Isabella's hand went numb. She stood there in the middle of the gala, surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses, watching that blue dot throb like a tiny heart beating in another woman's bedroom. The champagne tower reflected fractured light across her face. Someone bumped into her, apologized without looking. The world kept spinning. Her marriage ended in complete silence. Your husband didn't come. The voice drifted beside her, low, controlled, dangerous. Isabella didn't need to turn to know who it was. She'd spent 3 years working close enough to Lorenzo Vasilev to recognize the exact cadence of his words, the way he moved through space like smoke with a spine. He got held up, she heard herself say. The lie tasted like metal. Lorenzo shifted closer, not touching, never touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his shoulders beneath his tailored black suit. He smelled like cedar and something darker she'd never been able to name. Isabella. Her name in his mouth sounded different than when anyone else said it. Slower. Heavier. Don't. She finally looked at him. Lorenzo Vasilev stood a head taller than most men in the room, with sharp Slavic features that belonged on currency or wanted posters, dark eyes that saw too much. At 42, he carried himself with the kind of absolute authority that made senators nervous and rival businessmen reconsider their life choices. He was also, technically, her boss. CEO of Volkov Global Enterprises, luxury hotels, international shipping, private investments. At least that's what the annual reports claimed. The truth lived in darker corners, whispered in back rooms by men who didn't survive being wrong. Don't what? Isabella asked quietly. Lie to me. Lorenzo's gaze moved across her face like he was reading a language only he understood. You're too intelligent for it, and I've never required that particular performance from you. Something in her chest cracked, just slightly, just enough to let a thin stream of rage seep through. You knew, she said. Not a question. Lorenzo reached past her and plucked two champagne flutes from a passing server's tray. He handed her one. His fingers were steady. Hers weren't. "I've known for 6 weeks," he said calmly. "Her name is Rachel. She works in marketing at Fisher & Lee. They met at a conference in Boston last September. He sees her Tuesday and Thursday evenings, tells you he's working late. Last weekend, when he said he had a client emergency in Philadelphia, he was actually at a bed and breakfast in Vermont." The champagne glass nearly slipped from Isabella's hand. She stared at Lorenzo, her mind refusing to process the level of surveillance his words implied. "Why, Her voice came out strangled. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. Something old and patient and utterly merciless. "Because you weren't ready to hear it," he paused. "Until tonight." The ballroom suddenly felt too small, too bright, too full of people who didn't matter. Isabella's pulse hammered in her throat. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw the champagne glass against the nearest wall and watch it explode. Wanted to call Adrian and demand explanations she already knew would be lies. Instead, she lifted the flute to her lips and drank. "There's a balcony," Lorenzo said quietly. "Third floor, east wing, no cameras." He walked away before she could respond, moving through the crowd with the kind of ease that came from owning every room he entered. Isabella watched him disappear into the glittering chaos, her heart doing something violent and arrhythmic in her chest. She followed him. The balcony overlooked Manhattan like a threat. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains, covering the city in false purity. Isabella stepped outside, heels clicking against stone, and the cold hit her like a fist. Lorenzo stood at the railing, perfectly still, snow gathering on his shoulders. "You're going to freeze," she said. "So are you." They stood there in the falling snow, two people pretending the temperature mattered. Below them, the city pulsed with light and movement, and 10 million separate betrayals happening simultaneously. "How long have you been watching me?" Isabella asked. Lorenzo turned his head slightly, snowflakes caught in his dark hair. 3 years. Since the day Adrian brought you to the company holiday party and introduced you as his wife." "Why?" "Because I saw what he didn't." Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. "That you were wasted on him." The words landed like stones in deep water. Isabella's breath came out in visible clouds. Her hands gripped the railing hard enough to hurt. "You don't know anything about me," she said. "I know you read Russian literature during your lunch breaks. I know you take the stairs instead of the elevator because you can't stand small talk with strangers. I know you reorganized the entire filing system for international acquisitions in your first month because the previous method offended your sense of logic." Lorenzo shifted closer, still not touching. "I know that your husband hasn't looked at you, really looked at you, in over a year, and I know that you've been pretending not to notice because admitting it would mean admitting you made a mistake." Isabella's chest constricted. "Stop. I know that you're brilliant, Isabella, that you see patterns in data that analysts with decades of experience miss, that you negotiate better than half my senior executives, that you should be running departments, not scheduling my meetings." His voice gentled, which somehow made it worse. "And I know that the only reason you're still playing secretary is because your husband needed you to be smaller than him." "Stop," she whispered again, but the word had no force behind it. "He's not coming back," Lorenzo said quietly. "Not the way you need him to. Men like Adrian don't change. They just get better at lying." Snow continued to fall. Far below, taxis honked. Sirens wailed. The city kept moving like none of this mattered. Isabella felt something fundamental shifting inside her chest, like tectonic plates grinding against each other before an earthquake. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Lorenzo finally turned to face her fully. The balcony lights cast shadows across his features, making him look like something carved from stone and winter. "I want to offer you a choice," he said. "You can go home tonight, file for divorce, start over. I'll make sure you land on your feet, new job, good references, a clean exit. Or," his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her ribs feel too tight, "or you let me protect you. You move into one of my properties. Let my lawyers handle Adrian. Let me show you what your life could look like when you stop making yourself smaller for men who don't deserve you." Isabella's laugh came out sharp and broken. "You're offering to be my, what, sugar daddy? Savior. I'm offering you freedom, Lorenzo corrected. With no conditions, no expectations. You want your own space? You have it. You want to leave Volkov Global? I'll write whatever recommendation you need. You want nothing to do with me personally? I'll respect that. He paused, and something dangerous flickered across his expression. But I won't lie to you, Isabella. I've wanted you for 3 years, and if you give me permission to pursue that want, I will do it with every resource and every piece of focus I possess. Guess. Her heart slammed against her ribs. You're my boss. So resign. She gestured vaguely at him, at the obvious violence lurking beneath his expensive suit. You're not exactly a safe choice. Lorenzo's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. No, he agreed. I'm not. I'm possessive, Isabella. I'm ruthless. I solve problems permanently. And if you become mine, I will burn down anyone who tries to hurt you, including your husband. The confession should have terrified her. Instead, it sent heat spiraling through her chest in a way that felt like falling. This is insane, Isabella breathed. Yes. I don't even know you. You know enough. Lorenzo's gaze held hers. You know that I see you, that I value what you're capable of, that I won't waste you. Snow fell between them. Isabella's mind spun through 1,000 rational objections, 100 reasons to walk away, every logical argument against what he was offering. But beneath the logic, beneath the fear, beneath 3 years of carefully constructed professional boundaries, something else whispered. What if? I need to think, she said finally. Lorenzo nodded once. Take all the time you need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Not his corporate one. Something simpler, with just a phone number printed in black ink. When you're ready, for whatever you decide, call me. Isabella took the card. Their fingers brushed. The contact lasted less than a second, but her skin burned where they'd touched. She turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Lorenzo alone with the snow and the city lights. Her hands shook. Her heart raced. Everything felt too sharp, too bright, too immediate. Inside, the gala continued its shallow pageantry. Isabella moved through the crowd like a ghost, hearing nothing, seeing nothing, feeling everything. She found her coat, called a car, walked out into the December night without saying goodbye to anyone. On the drive home, she stared at Lorenzo's card until the numbers blurred. The apartment she shared with Adrian sat dark and empty. Of course it did. He was still in Chelsea, still wrapped around another woman, still betraying her with the same hands that had promised forever during their wedding vows. Isabella stood in the middle of their living room, their carefully curated, perfectly decorated, absolutely lifeless living room, and felt the last threads of her marriage disintegrate. She pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, found Adrian's name. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she looked down at Lorenzo's card again. The choice presented itself with cruel simplicity. Beg for explanations from a man who'd already chosen someone else, or step into the unknown with a dangerous stranger who'd been watching her for 3 years. Isabella made the call. It rang twice. Isabella! Lorenzo's voice came through steady, unsurprised, like he'd been waiting by the phone. I'm at my apartment, she said. Her voice sounded strange, distant. Can you send a car? It's already on its way. Of course it was. Lorenzo Vasilev didn't make offers he wasn't prepared to follow through on immediately. I'm not agreeing to anything, Isabella added quickly. I can't be here when he comes home. Understood. A pause. Isabella? Yes? You're making the right choice, even if you don't believe it yet. The line went dead. Isabella stood there holding her phone, watching her reflection in the darkened window. She looked like a stranger. Maybe that was the point. The car arrived 17 minutes later, a black Mercedes with tinted windows, and a driver who didn't ask questions. Isabella threw clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. She took her passport, her laptop, the jewelry her grandmother left her. Everything else could burn. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. Adrian would figure it out when he finally bothered to come home. The Mercedes drove through Manhattan like a shark through dark water, smooth and predatory. They passed the apartment complex in Chelsea. Isabella didn't look up. The building Lorenzo brought her to stood in Tribeca, all glass and steel and brutal elegance. The driver led her to a private elevator that required a key card. They rode to the penthouse in silence. The doors opened directly into the apartment. Lorenzo stood waiting, still in his suit from the gala, snow long since melted from his shoulders. The space behind him stretched out in shadows and expensive minimalism, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, dark furniture, art that probably cost more than Isabella had made in her entire life. "Top floor is yours," he said simply. "Private entrance if you want it. Security monitors the building 24 hours. No one gets past the lobby without clearance." He gestured toward the windows. "There's food in the kitchen. Anything you need that isn't here, tell Maria. She manages the property." Isabella set down her suitcase. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, replaced by a strange, hollow calm. "Where will you be?" she asked. Lorenzo's expression flickered with something unreadable. "I have another property downtown. I'll stay there unless you specifically want me here." "Oh." The word came out smaller than she intended. They stood there in the quiet dark, city lights washing through the windows, the weight of every unspoken thing pressing down like atmospheric pressure. "Thank you," Isabella said finally. "For this? For not what?" Expecting something in return. Lorenzo moved closer, not touching, still maintaining that careful distance, but close enough that she could see the exact color of his eyes in the dim light, dark brown ringed with something almost black. "Isabella," he said quietly, "I told you, no conditions. You want to sleep for 3 days straight, sleep. You want to burn every photograph of your husband in the fireplace downstairs, I'll provide the matches. You want to sit here and put yourself back together in whatever shape feels right, I'll make sure no one disturbs you." His voice dropped lower. "And if you decide you want nothing to do with me after tonight, I'll respect that too." She believed him. That was the strangest part. This man, this criminal, this predator, this person who solved problems with violence, she believed he would keep his word. "I should let you rest," Lorenzo said, stepping back toward the elevator. "Wait." He paused, hand hovering near the call button. Isabella's heart hammered. "Stay, just for a while. I don't want to be alone right now." Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Relief, maybe, or hunger carefully controlled. "All right," he said. They sat in the living room with the city sprawled beneath them like scattered diamonds. Lorenzo poured vodka, real Russian vodka, the kind that tasted like winter and poor decisions. They didn't talk about Adrian, didn't talk about what came next. Instead, Lorenzo told her about growing up in Moscow, about learning English from contraband American movies, about the first time he saw New York and decided he would own pieces of it. Isabella listened, vodka burning down her throat, feeling the last 48 hours finally catching up to her exhausted body. "You should sleep," Lorenzo said eventually, noticing her eyes drifting. "I don't think I can." "When's the last time you ate?" Isabella tried to remember. Breakfast, maybe? The gala had been all champagne and nerves. Lorenzo disappeared into the kitchen. She heard cabinets opening, the gentle clatter of dishes. He returned with toast, cheese, fruit, simple things arranged without fuss. "Eat," he ordered quietly. She obeyed, surprised by how hungry she actually was. Lorenzo watched her with that same patient intensity, like he had all the time in the world and intended to spend it studying her. "Why me?" Isabella asked between bites. "You could have anyone." "I don't want anyone." His answer came without hesitation. "I want you." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Lorenzo leaned forward slightly. "I know that you're loyal past the point of logic, that you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it, that you have a conscience that won't let you become cruel even when cruelty would protect you." He paused. "I know that you're exactly the kind of person who could survive in my world without being destroyed by it." "Your world," Isabella repeated. "You mean the part where you run a criminal empire?" Lorenzo didn't flinch. "Yes. And you think I could handle that?" "I think you're strong enough to choose whether you want to try." The honesty landed like a physical thing, no denials, no pretty lies, just the truth offered flat and unflinching. Isabella set down her empty plate. "I should hate you for this, for watching me, for manipulating the situation." "Probably. But I don't." The confession tasted like surrender. "I should, but I don't." Lorenzo's gaze intensified. Isabella, I'm going to bed, she interrupted, standing abruptly. If she stayed here, if she kept letting him look at her like that, she would make decisions her rational mind wasn't ready for. Thank you for everything. She walked toward the stairs before he could respond. At the top, she paused and looked back. Lorenzo still sat in the living room, city lights carving shadows across his face, watching her with absolute focus. Good night, Lorenzo, she said softly. Good night, Isabella. She went upstairs to the bedroom that had been prepared for her. Expensive sheets, fresh flowers, everything perfect and impersonal. She lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. Adrian's name flashed across the screen. She watched it ring 4 times before it went to voicemail. Then it started again. And again. On the 5th call, she finally answered. Where are you? Adrian's voice came through tight with anger, barely pretending to be concerned. I came home. Your stuff is gone. What the hell, Isabella? She closed her eyes. I know about Rachel. Silence crashed down the line. Isa, listen. Don't call me that. Her voice came out cold. You don't get to use that name anymore. It's not... You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Isabella sat up, rage finally breaking through the numbness. 6 weeks, Adrian. You've been sleeping with her for 6 weeks, probably longer. How did you... He caught himself. Who told you? Does it matter? Yes, it fucking matters. Adrian's voice cracked into something raw and desperate. Whatever they said, whatever you think you know, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Isabella's hand tightened around the phone. I'm filing for divorce. No, Isabella, come on, we can fix this. I made a mistake. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want. I want you to sign the papers when they arrive. Isa, please. She hung up, blocked his number, threw the phone across the room where it hit the wall with a satisfying crack. Then she finally cried. Not quiet, dignified tears. The ugly kind. The kind that came from 3 years of swallowing disappointment, of making herself smaller, of pretending her marriage wasn't dying one lie at a time. She cried until her chest ached and her throat burned and exhaustion dragged her under. Somewhere in the apartment below, Lorenzo Vasiliev sat in the darkness and waited. Patient, relentless, absolutely certain she would eventually choose him. And as Isabella finally fell asleep in her expensive borrowed bedroom, with her destroyed marriage and her terrifying new protector, and a future that looked nothing like the life she'd planned, one thought followed her down into unconsciousness. He was probably right. Isabella woke to sunlight cutting through floor-to-ceiling windows like a knife. For 3 seconds, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. Adrian, Rachel, Lorenzo, the penthouse, the vodka, the crying that had scraped her throat raw. She rolled over and checked the nightstand. Someone had left water, aspirin, and a handwritten note in sharp, precise script. Lawyers arrive at 10 a.m. Drink the water. L. It was 9:47. Isabella dragged herself upright, head pounding, mascara smeared across the silk pillowcase like a crime scene. She looked like hell. Felt worse. Her phone lay cracked on the floor where she'd thrown it. 17 missed calls from Adrian. 32 texts that started with apologies and ended with threats. She stepped over all of it and headed for the shower. The bathroom was obscene. Marble everywhere, a rainfall showerhead the size of a dinner plate, heated floors that felt like standing on summer pavement. Isabella let water beat against her skull until the steam made it hard to breathe. When she finally emerged, someone had laid out clothes on the bed. Black slacks, cream silk blouse, understated jewelry. Her size. Her style. Lorenzo's attention to detail felt like surveillance and seduction wrapped in the same package. She dressed mechanically, muscles moving on autopilot while her brain tried to catch up to the decision she'd made last night. She'd left her husband, moved in with her boss, a man who openly admitted to running criminal operations behind his luxury hotel empire, a man who'd been watching her for 3 years. The rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. The rest of her felt oddly, terrifyingly calm. Downstairs, voices drifted from the dining room. Isabella followed them and found Lorenzo sitting at the head of a long table with 2 people in expensive suits. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes like a shark. A younger man with wire-frame glasses and the nervous energy of someone who'd memorized 14 contingency plans. Lorenzo looked up as Isabella entered. He'd changed since last night. Charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked like he'd slept perfectly, which probably meant he hadn't slept at all. "Isabella," he said, standing. The other two followed his lead immediately. "This is Diane Kovacs, my head attorney, and Marcus Chen, her associate." Diane extended a hand. Her grip could crack walnuts. "Mrs. Mercer, pleasure." "It's Miss Sinclair now," Isabella corrected quietly. Something approving flickered across Diane's expression. "Noted. Shall we begin?" They sat. Lorenzo poured coffee from a French press without asking if she wanted any. He remembered. 2 sugars, no cream. Details she'd never mentioned, absorbed through observation. Diane opened a leather portfolio and got straight to it. "New York is a no-fault divorce state. We file on the grounds of irretrievable breakdown. Given the affair, we push for an immediate separation agreement and fast-track the proceedings. Mr. Mercer will likely contest, but his leverage is limited." "He'll make noise," Marcus added, adjusting his glasses. "Threaten to drag it out. But noise is all he has. The affair gives us significant advantage." Isabella wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "How long?" 3 to 6 months if he cooperates," Diane said. "Longer if he wants to be difficult." She paused, studying Isabella with clinical precision. "I need to ask, do you want anything from him? Assets, alimony, property settlements?" "No." Lorenzo's gaze sharpened. "Isabella, no," she repeated firmly. "I don't want his money. I don't want the apartment. I just want out." Diane glanced at Lorenzo, some unspoken communication passing between them. "That makes things simpler. We'll draft papers today. You'll need to sign. Then we serve him." "How?" Marcus smiled thinly. "We have someone who specializes in difficult deliveries." Isabella didn't ask what that meant. She was learning that in Lorenzo's world some questions were better left unspoken. They spent the next hour going through details. Finances, timelines, potential complications. Isabella answered on autopilot while her mind drifted to the phone upstairs with Adrian's messages multiplying like bacteria. Finally, Diane closed her portfolio. "We'll have initial documents by end of day. Any questions?" "Just one," Isabella said. "What happens when Adrian finds out where I'm staying?" Lorenzo's expression went very still. "He won't." "You can't hide me forever." "I'm not hiding you." Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "I'm protecting you. There's a difference." After the lawyers left, Isabella stood at the windows watching the city move below. People rushing to jobs they hated, relationships they were lying about, lives built on foundations that would eventually crack. She'd been one of them 48 hours ago. Now she was something else entirely. Lorenzo appeared beside her with fresh coffee. "You should eat." "I'm not hungry." "You will be." He set the cup on the side table. "I have meetings this afternoon. Alexei will drive you anywhere you need to go." "Alexei?" "Head of security, former Spetsnaz. Speaks 4 languages, extremely efficient." Lorenzo paused. "Also extremely loyal. You can trust him." Isabella turned to face him. "How many people work for you?" "In legitimate businesses? Around 2,000. "And the other kind?" Lorenzo's mouth curved slightly. "Fewer, but more motivated." "That's not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and expensive soap. "I need you to understand something, Isabella. The divorce will get ugly. Adrian will retaliate. He'll hire investigators, spread rumors, try to make you look unstable." "Let him try." "He'll come after me too, dig into my businesses, feed information to journalists, maybe even law enforcement." Isabella felt her spine straighten. "Then maybe I should leave before I make things worse for you." Lorenzo's hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not hard, just firm enough to stop her from moving away. His thumb pressed against her pulse point, feeling her heartbeat accelerate. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't run because you think you're protecting me. I've survived worse than an angry husband playing detective." "You don't know what Adrian's capable of." "Yes, I do." Lorenzo's grip tightened fractionally. "I know exactly what he's capable of. I know he'll threaten you, try to manipulate you back, paint himself as the victim. And when that doesn't work, he'll turn vicious." His eyes locked onto hers. which is why you're going to let me handle him. Handle him how? However necessary. The words hung between them like drawn blades. Isabella should have been horrified, should have pulled away and demanded details. Instead, she felt something dark and vengeful unfurl in her chest. "I don't want you to kill him," she said. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. "I wasn't planning to, unless he forces my hand." Lorenzo. He betrayed you, Isabella, humiliated you, wasted years of your life. Lorenzo released her wrist and stepped back, giving her space while his voice stayed low and controlled. Men like Adrian need consequences, real ones, not therapy and second chances and pathetic apologies. What are you going to do? Make sure he signs the papers. Make sure he understands that coming after you again would be a terminal mistake. Lorenzo straightened his cuffs with deliberate calm. "Unless you'd prefer I take a different approach." Isabella's hands shook. She shoved them in her pockets so he wouldn't see. "No. Do what you need to do." Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, approval mixed with something darker. "Good." He left for his meetings 20 minutes later. Isabella spent the rest of the morning alone in the penthouse, pacing like a caged animal. Her phone kept buzzing, Adrian's messages evolving from apologetic to angry to desperate. She read them all without responding, watching her husband unravel in real time. Around 2 p.m., her mother called. Isabella stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. "Isabella Marie Sinclair, what in heaven's name is going on?" Her mother's voice came through sharp with Connecticut disapproval. "Adrian called me sobbing, said you left him, moved out without explanation." "He didn't mention the affair?" Silence crackled down the line. Then, "What affair?" Of course Adrian hadn't told her. Why confess when he could play victim instead? "He's been sleeping with someone else for months," Isabella said flatly. "Maybe longer. I found out at the Christmas gala and left." Her mother made a small sound. Not quite shock, more like resigned disappointment. "Oh, Isabella. Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't say his name with that tone, like I'm the one who did something wrong." "I didn't say that. You were about to." Isabella walked to the windows, pressing her forehead against cold glass. "You were about to tell me that marriages take work, that I should give him another chance, that successful women make sacrifices. Well, don't they?" Her mother's voice hardened. "You think your father was perfect? You think any marriage survives 30 years without compromise?" "There's compromise and there's humiliation, Mom." Adrian chose the latter. Her mother sighed, a long, suffering exhale that Isabella had heard her entire childhood whenever she'd failed to meet some invisible standard. "Where are you staying?" Isabella hesitated. "With a friend." "What friend? You don't have friends in the city. You barely leave that apartment except for work." "A colleague, then." "Isabella?" Her mother's voice sharpened. "Are you with another man?" The accusation landed like a slap. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. My God, you're still married. You can't just—" "Adrian's the one who cheated, Mom, not me." "But how will it look? You leave your husband and immediately move in with some man? People will talk. They'll say you're the reason the marriage failed." Isabella laughed, a brittle, broken sound. "Let them talk." "You're being reckless. I'm being free. You're being stupid." Her mother's voice turned cold. "Whatever you think you're doing, it won't end well. Men like that, the ones who swoop in during a crisis, they don't want to save you, Isabella. They want to own you." The words hit closer than Isabella wanted to admit. She thought about Lorenzo watching her for 3 years, about the penthouse prepared for her arrival, about the lawyers who appeared within hours, about the security detail and the carefully selected clothes and the way he looked at her like she was something rare and dangerous he intended to possess. "I have to go," Isabella said. "Isabella, wait." She hung up. Blocked that number, too. By evening, she felt like something hollowed out and raw. When Lorenzo returned, she was sitting in the dark, nursing whiskey she'd found in his bar. He didn't turn on the lights, just crossed to where she sat and took the glass from her hand. "How much have you had?" he asked. "Not enough." Lorenzo set the whiskey aside and crouched in front of her, eye level. "What happened?" My mother called, told me I'm making a mistake, that you're just using me. Am I? Isabella looked at him. This man who terrified criminals and corrupted politicians, kneeling in front of her like she was something precious. I don't know. Are you? Yes, Lorenzo said simply. I'm using you to justify finally taking what I've wanted for 3 years. I'm using your divorce as an excuse to insert myself into your life. I'm using your vulnerability to make you dependent on my protection. He paused. But you're using me too, Isabella, for revenge, for safety, for the proof that you're worth more than your husband believed. The honesty cut through her defenses like wire through flesh. Isabella felt tears burning behind her eyes. I hate that you're right, she whispered. Lorenzo reached up and cupped her face with both hands. His palms were warm, calloused. Then hate me, but don't leave. She kissed him. Not gentle, not tentative. She grabbed his collar and pulled him forward and crashed their mouths together with 3 years of suppressed wanting. Lorenzo made a sound low in his throat, surprise or surrender or both. And then his hands were in her hair and he was kissing her back with brutal intensity. It felt like falling and fighting and finally breathing all at once. Lorenzo pulled away first, breathing hard, forehead pressed against hers. Isabella, don't, she said. Don't tell me this is a bad idea. Don't tell me I'm not thinking clearly. I know exactly what I'm doing. Do you? His voice came out rough. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to professional boundaries. No pretending this is just protection. Good. Isabella's fingers tightened on his collar. I don't want protection. I want... His mouth cut off whatever she'd been about to say. This kiss was different, slower, deeper, more deliberate. Lorenzo kissed like he did everything else, with absolute focus and zero hesitation. His hands moved down her spine, learning the architecture of her body through expensive fabric. Isabella's rational mind screamed warnings. Too fast, too reckless, too dangerous. She ignored all of it and pulled him closer. They ended up against the window. Her back pressed to cold glass, Lorenzo's weight pinning her in place, the city lights washing over them like distant judgment. His mouth moved to her throat, and Isabella's head fell back, pulse hammering against his lips. Tell me to stop. Lorenzo breathed against her skin. No. His teeth grazed her collarbone. Isabella! Her phone exploded with sound from across the room. They both froze. The ringtone cut through the moment like a chainsaw. Lorenzo pulled back slightly, eyes dark and dangerous. Ignore it. But Isabella had already recognized the sound. Her work phone, the one only emergencies used. She'd left it in her bag. Someone from Volkov Global was calling at 9 p.m. I can't, she said. Lorenzo stepped away, jaw tight, breathing controlled. Isabella retrieved the phone with shaking hands. Hello? Ms. Sinclair. A voice she didn't recognize, male, young, nervous. This is David from IT. I'm sorry to call so late, but we have a situation. What kind of situation? Someone tried to access your computer remotely 2 hours ago, used your credentials. We flagged it as suspicious and locked the account. Ice slid down Isabella's spine. Did they get in? No, ma'am, but they tried 17 times. We traced the IP address. David paused. It's coming from Mr. Mercer's home network. Adrian, of course. Looking for leverage, ammunition, anything he could use against her or Lorenzo. What files did they try to access? Isabella asked. Your email, calendar, some shared drives for international acquisitions. Another pause, heavier this time. Miss Sinclair, I'm required to report this to Mr. Vasilev. It's a security protocol. He's right here. I'll tell him myself. She hung up and looked at Lorenzo. Adrian tried to hack my work account. Lorenzo's expression went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. When? 2 hours ago, 17 attempts. What was he looking for? Probably dirt on you, evidence of illegal operations, something to use in the divorce. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and made a call. Alexei, I need you at the Mercer apartment in Chelsea. Now. He paused, listening. No, just surveillance. I want to know who he talks to, where he goes, what he's planning. Another pause. And pull his phone records for the last month. I want to know everyone he's contacted. He hung up and looked at Isabella. This is what I meant. Adrian won't go quietly. Let him dig. Isabella felt rage replacing fear. He won't find anything. He doesn't need to find anything real, just enough to build a narrative. Lorenzo moved to the bar and poured 2 glasses of vodka. Journalists love stories about corrupt businessmen and their mistresses. Prosecutors love building careers on high-profile takedowns. I'm not your mistress. Lorenzo handed her a glass, mouth curving slightly. Not yet. The implication sent heat through her chest. So what do? We make sure Adrian understands that continuing down this path would be catastrophic for him. Lorenzo raised his glass, and then we let him make his choice. They drank. The vodka burned. Outside, the city glittered with a million separate disasters in progress. Isabella's work phone rang again. Different number this time. She answered. Isabella. Diane Kovach's voice came through clipped and urgent. We have a problem. Adrian hired Mitchell and Stone. Isabella's stomach dropped. Mitchell and Stone was the firm that represented Fortune 500 CEOs during scandals. Divorce lawyers who played dirty and won ugly. How bad? She asked. They're filing a counter-petition tomorrow morning, claiming emotional distress, alienation of affection, and… Diane paused. He's accusing Lorenzo of predatory behavior toward a subordinate employee. That's insane. That's strategy. They're going to paint you as a victim, Lorenzo as a manipulator. The affair becomes secondary to the narrative that you were coerced into leaving. Isabella looked at Lorenzo. He was watching her with absolute focus, reading the conversation from her expression. Can they make it stick? Isabella asked. In court? No. In the media? Absolutely. Diane's voice hardened. We need to respond immediately. Full offensive. I'll draft a statement tonight. What kind of statement? The truth. That you discovered the affair independently. That Lorenzo provided housing as a courtesy to a valued employee. That Adrian's accusations are desperate attempts to avoid accountability. Do it, Isabella said. After she hung up, Lorenzo refilled her glass without asking. He's escalating. So do we. Something dangerous flickered across Lorenzo's face. What did you have in mind? Isabella felt the last threads of her old life burning away. The careful, measured, conflict-avoidant woman she'd been for 3 years died somewhere between the vodka and the rage. I want him destroyed, she said quietly. Not just divorced, not just humiliated. I want every lie exposed, every secret dragged into daylight. I want him to understand what it feels like to have everything taken away. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile, sharp and approving and absolutely merciless. Finally, he said, I was wondering when you'd stop playing nice. Over the next week, Isabella learned what Lorenzo's version of war looked like. Adrian's affair became front-page gossip in the society columns. Somehow, photographers appeared outside Rachel's apartment. Somehow, text messages between the two appeared leaked to bloggers. Somehow, Adrian's boss at the consulting firm received anonymous tips about expense reports and client billings that didn't quite add up. Adrian fought back, gave interviews painting himself as the wounded husband, claimed Isabella had been having an affair with Lorenzo for months, threatened to go to the FBI with evidence of money laundering through Volkov Global. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He had better lawyers, better investigators, better leverage. Isabella watched it all from the penthouse, like observing a distant storm. She went to work each day. Lorenzo insisted she maintain normalcy, and ignored the whispers from colleagues. Some looked at her with pity, others with envy, a few with outright hostility. She stopped caring what any of them thought. At night, she and Lorenzo fell into a rhythm. He'd come home from meetings smelling like expensive restaurants and veiled threats. She'd pour drinks and listen to him explain the chess game happening in shadows. Whose loyalty cost how much, which journalist could be bought, what politician owed him favors. They didn't sleep together. Not yet. But the tension built like pressure behind a dam. One night, 2 weeks after she'd left Adrian, Isabella found Lorenzo in his study going through documents. He looked exhausted. Sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, shadows under his eyes. You should rest, she said from the doorway. Lorenzo glanced up. So should you. Can't sleep. Nightmares? Regrets. Isabella moved into the study and sat across from him. Not about leaving, About staying as long as I did. Lorenzo set down his pen. We justify what we need to survive. Is that what you do? Justify? Every day. He leaned back, studying her. My father used to say that powerful men don't have the luxury of guilt, that hesitation gets you killed. His mouth curved slightly. He was right about one thing. Hesitation is fatal. The guilt, though, that never goes away. You just learn to function with it. What do you feel guilty about? Lorenzo's expression shuddered. How much time do you have? All night? He considered her for a long moment. Then, come here. Isabella rose and rounded the desk. Lorenzo pulled her down onto his lap, one arm circling her waist, keeping her close. She could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. Steady, controlled, alive. I feel guilty, Lorenzo said quietly, about the men I've killed, the families I've destroyed building this empire, the corruption I've facilitated, the laws I've broken so frequently they've become routine. His hand moved up her spine. And I feel guilty about wanting you while you were married, about watching you, about planning exactly how I'd take you away from him the moment an opportunity appeared. You didn't take me, Isabella said. I chose to leave, because I made sure you had that choice. So you manipulated the situation. Is that supposed to make me angry? Lorenzo's grip tightened. It should. Isabella shifted to face him fully, straddling his lap, knees bracketing his thighs. His eyes went dark and dangerous. Lorenzo, she said carefully, I'm not some innocent victim you corrupted. I'm a grown woman who made a decision. Stop trying to give me reasons to hate you. Someone should. Why? Because if you don't... His voice roughened. If you don't maintain some distance, some self-preservation, you'll end up trapped in my world with no way out. Isabella leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. What if I don't want a way out? Lorenzo's control cracked. He kissed her hard, hands fisting in her hair, pulling her closer with barely restrained violence. Isabella kissed back just as fiercely, nails digging into his shoulders through expensive fabric. They broke apart, breathing hard. This is a mistake, Lorenzo said, forehead pressed to hers. Probably. I'm not a good man, Isabella. I don't want a good man. Her fingers moved to his collar, loosening his shirt. I want you. Lorenzo caught her hand, stopping her. Not like this. Not while you're still angry. Not while you're using me to hurt Adrian. I'm not. Yes, you are. He held her gaze. And I don't care. Use me. Hurt him. Burn down your old life. But when we finally do this... His thumb brushed across her lower lip. When I finally have you the way I've wanted for 3 years, I want you clear-headed. I want you choosing me because you want me, not because you're running from something else. The restraint in his voice was agony. Isabella could feel how much it cost him to pull back, could feel the evidence of his want pressed against her thigh. How long? She asked. How long what? How long do I have to wait before you believe I'm choosing you and not just running? Lorenzo's smile was sharp and possessive. Until you stop flinching when I touch you. Until you look at me without wondering if you're making a mistake. Until you trust that what I feel for you isn't just obsession. And if it is just obsession, then we'll burn together, Lorenzo said simply. And I'll make sure you enjoy every second of it. Before Isabella could respond, his phone rang. He answered without looking away from her. What? Not a question. A command. Whatever the person on the other end said made Lorenzo's expression go cold and lethal. When? A pause. I'm on my way. He hung up and lifted Isabella off his lap with careful control. I have to go. What happened? Adrian made a mistake. Lorenzo stood, already reaching for his jacket. Alexei will stay with you. Don't leave the building. Lorenzo. He kissed her once, quick and brutal. Trust me. Then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone in the study with her heart racing and questions multiplying like viruses. She lasted 20 minutes before calling Alexei. The security chief appeared within seconds, 6 feet of dense muscle with a face like carved granite and eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything. Where did he go? Isabella demanded. I cannot say, Miss Sinclair. Can't or won't? Alexei's expression didn't change. Both. Did something happen to Adrian? I do not discuss Mr. Vasilev's business. Isabella wanted to scream. Instead, she paced the study like a trapped animal, imagining scenarios that ranged from Adrian being arrested to Adrian being murdered in some warehouse. Lorenzo didn't return until dawn. Isabella had fallen asleep on the couch, still fully dressed. She woke to find him standing over her, suit jacket gone, shirt untucked, knuckles raw and bleeding. She sat up immediately. What did you do? Nothing permanent. Lorenzo moved to the bar and poured whiskey with shaking hands. Unfortunately. Lorenzo. He downed the glass in one swallow, poured another. Adrian went to the press, gave an exclusive interview to a journalist who specializes in exposing financial crimes. Named me specifically, provided documentation he claims proves money laundering. Isabella's blood went cold. Is it real? Some of it. Lorenzo's voice stayed flat. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to build a case, but enough to make my life extremely complicated. So what happened tonight? Lorenzo finally looked at her. His eyes were empty in a way that made her stomach drop. I had a conversation with the journalist, he said quietly. Explained that publishing the story would be a career-ending decision, showed him evidence of certain indiscretions in his past that his employers would find interesting. He set down the glass. He's agreed to kill the piece. And Adrian? Is currently somewhere very uncomfortable having a very educational conversation about consequences. Isabella should have been horrified, should have demanded details, should have run. Instead, she crossed to where Lorenzo stood and took his bleeding hand in hers. You're hurt, she said. I'm fine. No, you're not. She led him to the bathroom, sat him on the counter, and carefully cleaned his knuckles with warm water. Lorenzo watched her work in silence, something unreadable moving behind his exhausted eyes. You should be disgusted, he said finally. I'm not. Isabella, he tried to destroy you. She met his gaze while pressing gauze against split skin. He came after the man protecting me. What did you expect me to feel? Sympathy? Lorenzo caught her wrist, pulling her between his legs. This is what my world looks like. Threats and violence and problems solved with fear. Can you really live with that? Isabella thought about Adrian's text messages, about her mother's disapproval, about 3 years of making herself smaller while her husband grew crueler. Yes, she said, I can. Lorenzo searched her face like he was looking for cracks in her certainty. Then he pulled her forward and kissed her with something that felt like relief and surrender, mixed together. When they finally broke apart, Isabella whispered against his mouth, What happens now? Now, Lorenzo said quietly. Adrian signs the divorce papers, drops all accusations, disappears from your life permanently. And if he doesn't? Lorenzo's smile was terrifying. Then I stopped being civilized. The next morning, divorce papers arrived at Adrian's apartment via special courier. He signed them within an hour. No negotiations, no counteroffers, no final attempts at reconciliation, just his signature and absolute silence. Isabella stared at the electronic confirmation on Diane's laptop, feeling something hollow and final settle in her chest. It's done, Diane said. 90 days until it's official. But functionally, your marriage is over. Isabella nodded. She should have felt relief, freedom, victory. Instead, she felt nothing except the weight of what came next, because Lorenzo had been right about one thing. There was no going back from this. No returning to the woman she'd been before the gala, before the affair, before she'd stepped into the dangerous gravitational pull of a man who solved problems with violence and loved her with obsessive totality. She was his now. And terrifyingly, she wanted to be. That night, Lorenzo found her on the balcony where this had all started. Same falling snow, same city lights, completely different woman. He didn't speak, just stood beside her and waited. I'm free, Isabella said finally. Are you? She turned to face him. Lorenzo looked at her the way he always had, with absolute focus and barely controlled hunger. No, she admitted. I'm not free at all. Lorenzo's hand came up to cup her face. Then what are you? Isabella leaned into his touch, feeling the last of her resistance crumble. Yours, she whispered. Lorenzo's eyes went dark with triumph and want and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Say it again. I'm yours, Lorenzo. He kissed her then, not gentle, not tentative, but with 3 years of restraint finally breaking. Isabella kissed him back, tasting snow and danger and the future she was choosing with absolute clarity. When they finally pulled apart, Lorenzo kept her close, forehead pressed to hers, breathing hard. No going back, he said. No going back, Isabella agreed. And as snow fell around them and the city sprawled below like a kingdom waiting to be claimed, Isabella Sinclair stepped fully into the darkness beside Lorenzo Vasilev, knowing exactly what she was doing, knowing there would be blood, knowing she didn't care anymore. Because some falls aren't accidents, some falls are choices, and she'd finally chosen to stop fighting gravity. The first time Isabella walked into Lorenzo's real office, not the executive suite at Volkov Global with its mahogany and leather, but the concrete room 3 floors beneath a shipping warehouse in Red Hook, she understood exactly what she'd chosen. Men with guns stood at every entrance. Security cameras tracked movement with mechanical precision. A table in the center held laptops displaying surveillance feeds from a dozen locations across the city. And Lorenzo stood at the head of it all, discussing territorial boundaries with 3 men whose eyes were flat and dead. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something darker. Isabella, what are you doing here? Alexei brought me. She moved deeper into the room, ignoring the way every armed man tracked her movement. You said if I wanted to understand your world, I needed to see it. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He exchanged a look with Alexei that promised a later conversation. We're in the middle of... I can see that. Isabella stopped beside the table, studying the surveillance feeds. One showed a nightclub entrance, another, a shipping container yard. A third displayed what looked like a private airstrip. Are you going to introduce me, or do I have to guess which of these men reports directly to you versus which ones are trying to kill you? Silence crashed through the room. Then one of the men, late 50s, scarred face, expensive suit, laughed. It sounded like gravel in a blender. She has spine, he said in Russian-accented English. I like her better than the last one already. Lorenzo's expression went very still. Victor. What? It's true. That Brazilian girl, she cried every time she saw blood. This one. Victor gestured at Isabella with something approaching respect. This one walks into a war room and asks for introductions. Isabella filed away 2 pieces of information. Lorenzo had brought other women into his world before, and at least one hadn't survived the experience emotionally intact. Isabella Sinclair, Lorenzo said with careful formality. Viktor Kozlov. He handles East Coast distribution, Dmitry Sokolov, logistics, and Marcus Tate, acquisitions. He paused. Gentlemen, my partner. The word landed with weight. Not girlfriend, not mistress. Partner. Victor's eyebrows rose. Partner in business or partner in bed? Both, Isabella said before Lorenzo could answer. Is that a problem? Victor studied her with new interest. No problem, just unexpected. Lorenzo usually keeps his personal life very separate from operations. Things change, Lorenzo said flatly. He turned to Isabella. Give us 10 minutes to finish this discussion. Then I'll explain everything. I'd rather stay. Isabella, you said no secrets. She met his gaze directly. Or did that only apply when it was convenient? Something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The other men watched this confrontation with the focused attention of predators recognizing a power struggle. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, he nodded. Fine. Sit. Isabella took the empty chair beside him. Lorenzo returned to the discussion. Something about a shipment arriving Thursday that needed to be rerouted through Baltimore instead of Newark because federal task force activity had increased at the port. Isabella listened, absorbing the coded language, the casual way they discussed bribing customs officials and eliminating complications. After 15 minutes, the meeting ended. The men filed out, each nodding respectfully to Isabella as they passed. Victor paused at the door. You know what you're getting into? He asked her quietly. I'm learning. Learn fast, Victor said. Women who hesitate in this world don't last long. After he left, Isabella and Lorenzo sat alone in the concrete room surrounded by surveillance feeds and the ghost of violence. You shouldn't have come here, Lorenzo said finally. Why not? Because seeing this makes it too real? Isabella gestured at the screens. I already knew what you were, Lorenzo. Watching you manage it doesn't change anything. It should. He stood and poured vodka from a bottle kept in a steel cabinet. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding direct confrontation with evil. You walked into it voluntarily. Are you evil? Lorenzo considered the question seriously. I facilitate the distribution of illegal substances that destroy lives. I bribe government officials. I've ordered men killed for betraying my organization. I operate outside the law because the law is written by people with less power than me. He handed her a glass. Yes, Isabella. By most definitions, I'm evil. And yet you've never lied to me, never forced me to do anything I didn't choose, never pretended to be something you're not. Isabella drank, vodka burning down her throat. My husband was a liar who wore respectability like camouflage. You're a criminal who's honest about exactly what you are. I know which one I trust more. Lorenzo moved closer, studying her face like he was searching for cracks in her certainty. You say that now, but eventually you'll see something you can't unsee, something that breaks whatever illusion you're maintaining about me being redeemable. I'm not trying to redeem you. Then what are you trying to do? Isabella set down her glass and stood, closing the distance between them until they were inches apart. Survive in your world without losing myself completely. And if that's not possible, then I'll lose myself. She reached up and traced the line of his jaw. As long as I'm losing myself to you and not to someone who doesn't value what I'm sacrificing. Lorenzo caught her hand, pressing it against his face. You're terrifying. You know that. Good. You should be a little afraid of me. His laugh was low and dark. Oh, I am. You have no idea how much. They stayed in the warehouse until midnight, Lorenzo walking her through the mechanics of his empire. He showed her shipping manifests that hid contraband between legitimate cargo, financial statements where money laundered through shell corporations, a private server containing leverage on politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials. This is how empires function, Lorenzo explained, pulling up documents on one of the laptops. Not through violence, though that's sometimes necessary, through information, through knowing which pressure points to press and exactly how hard to press them. Isabella studied a file detailing a senator's gambling addiction and undisclosed debts. And when pressure doesn't work, then we move to permanent solutions. You mean murder? Lorenzo didn't flinch from the word. Yes. How many? How many what? How many people have you killed? Personally, not ordered. How many times have you been the one pulling the trigger? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. 7. That I remember clearly. Probably more during my early years in Moscow when survival required immediate violence. He looked at her. Does that number change how you feel about me? Isabella considered it honestly. A month ago, the answer would have been yes. Now, standing in this concrete room surrounded by evidence of systematic criminality, she felt only a strange, cold acceptance. No, she said. It doesn't. Why not? Because I'm starting to understand that the world has different rules for different people, and the rules that govern your survival are nothing like the ones I grew up believing mattered. Lorenzo pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair. You're adapting too quickly. It worries me. Would you prefer I stayed naive? I'd prefer you stayed safe. But since you've made that impossible... His mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted like vodka and resignation and barely controlled need. They broke apart breathing hard. Isabella's fingers curled into his shirt. Take me home, she whispered. We are home. No. Take me to your real home. Not the penthouse you prepared for me. The place where you actually live. Lorenzo studied her face. You sure you want that? Yes. He drove them himself, no security detail, just the two of them in a black Mercedes cutting through late-night traffic. They ended up in Brooklyn Heights at a brownstone that looked deceptively ordinary from the outside. Inside was different, minimalist to the point of severity, dark furniture, exposed brick, art that Isabella recognized from auction catalogs, Pieces worth hundreds of thousands displayed casually on walls. A kitchen that looked barely used. And everywhere, books. Shelves lining every available wall, filled with volumes in Russian, English, Italian, French. You read all of these? Isabella asked, trailing fingers across spines. Most of them. Lorenzo poured wine in the kitchen. I don't sleep much. Reading passes the time. Isabella pulled out a worn copy of Dostoevsky. Crime and Punishment, fitting. I prefer the brothers Karamazov, more honest about the nature of morality. Which brother are you? Lorenzo smiled slightly. All of them, depending on the day. They sat on the leather couch with wine and comfortable silence. Isabella felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but a sense of rightness that had been missing from her entire marriage. I could get used to this, she said quietly. Don't. Lorenzo's voice carried warning. The moment you get comfortable is the moment something goes catastrophically wrong. Is that experience talking? Always. Isabella shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Lorenzo's arm came around her automatically, pulling her against his side. Tell me about the Brazilian girl, she said. Lorenzo went still. Victor talks too much. Did you love her? I thought I did. Turned out I loved the idea of her more than the reality. She wanted the luxury without the darkness. When she finally saw what I actually was, she left. He paused. It was better that way. What happened to her? Last I heard, she married a banker in Sao Paulo, has 2 kids, lives a very normal, very safe life. Lorenzo's fingers traced patterns on Isabella's shoulder. Everything I couldn't give her. Do you regret it? No. She deserved someone better than me. And I deserved someone strong enough to survive me. Isabella tilted her head up to look at him. You think I'm strong enough? I think you're stronger than you know, which is either going to save you or destroy you. I haven't decided which yet. They stayed like that for hours, talking in fragments about childhood and loss and all the ways people justified their worst choices. Lorenzo told her about growing up in Moscow during the collapse, about learning that loyalty was purchased and survival meant being more ruthless than the next person. Isabella told him about suffocating in Connecticut suburbs, about marrying Adrian because he represented escape, about waking up one day and realizing she'd traded one cage for another. Somewhere around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally dragged them under. They fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, wine glasses abandoned, the city silent outside bulletproof windows. Isabella woke to her phone vibrating violently on the coffee table. Early morning light filtered through blinds. Lorenzo still slept beside her, one arm draped across her waist, face finally relaxed. She grabbed the phone carefully, trying not to wake him. 12 missed calls, all from Diane Kovac. Isabella's stomach dropped. She extracted herself from Lorenzo's embrace and moved to the kitchen before calling back. Diane answered on the first ring. Where the hell have you been? I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. I was asleep. What's wrong? Everything. Diane's voice carried an edge Isabella had never heard before. Adrian's dead. The words didn't make sense. Isabella's brain refused to process them properly. What? Adrian Mercer was found dead in his apartment this morning. Apparent suicide. Gun, note, the whole setup. Diane paused. The police want to talk to you. Ice flooded Isabella's veins. Why? Because you're the ex-wife who filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Because there are documented threats from him against you. Because... Diane's voice dropped lower. Because the suicide note mentions you specifically. And Lorenzo. What does it say? That he couldn't live with what you'd both done to him. That you destroyed his life. That Lorenzo threatened him into signing the divorce papers. Diane exhaled shakily. Isabella, this is bad. Really bad. They're going to investigate this as a potential homicide, and you and Lorenzo are going to be prime suspects. Isabella's hands started shaking. Behind her, Lorenzo stirred on the couch. She watched him wake up, saw the exact moment he registered her expression, and went on full alert. I didn't kill him, Isabella said into the phone. I know that, but can you prove where you were last night? I was with Lorenzo, at his place, all night. That's not an alibi, that's a conspiracy. You need to listen to me very carefully, Isabella. Do not talk to the police without me present. Do not answer any questions. Do not try to explain anything. Diane's voice turned hard. And for the love of everything, do not let Lorenzo anywhere near this investigation. Lorenzo crossed to where Isabella stood, frozen in the kitchen. He took the phone gently from her hand. Diane, it's me. He listened for a moment. When did it happen? Another pause. No, we were together, all night. His eyes never left Isabella's face. I understand. We'll be there in an hour. He hung up and pulled Isabella against his chest. She stood rigid in his arms, mind spinning through implications. Did you kill him? She whispered. No. Did you order someone else to kill him? No. Lorenzo's voice stayed absolutely level. I didn't kill Adrian, Isabella. I didn't have him killed. I didn't arrange an accident. Whatever happened, I had nothing to do with it. Then why does it look like you did? Lorenzo was silent for a long moment. Then, because someone wants it to look that way. The next 6 hours blurred together in a nightmare of police stations and lawyers and questions asked 17 different ways. Isabella sat across from detectives who looked at her like she was already guilty, who implied she'd manipulated a vulnerable man into suicide, who suggested maybe Lorenzo had done the actual killing while she provided the motive. Diane shut down every question with professional precision, but Isabella could see the worry behind her lawyer's controlled expression. By the time they left the station, the media had already picked up the story. Camera crews waited outside. Questions screamed from a dozen directions. Ms. Sinclair, did you know your husband was suicidal? Is it true Lorenzo Vasilev threatened him? Are you responsible for Adrian Mercer's death? Alexei's security team formed a wall of muscle, pushing through the crowd to the waiting car. Isabella kept her head down, Diane's hand firm on her arm, Lorenzo a solid presence at her back. Inside the Mercedes, silence pressed down like burial dirt. This is a setup, Lorenzo said finally. Someone killed Adrian and staged it to look like suicide. Left a note designed to implicate us both. Who? Isabella's voice came out hollow. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Isabella stared out the window at Manhattan sliding past. What if they have evidence? What if whoever did this left traces pointing to you? Then we deal with it. How? Lorenzo's expression went cold and terrifying. However necessary. The investigation moved with brutal efficiency. Adrian's apartment was processed as a crime scene, his phone records subpoenaed, his laptop seized, every text message, every email, every digital footprint examined for evidence of harassment or threats. And someone had been very thorough in creating exactly that evidence. Text messages from a burner phone to Adrian, threatening him if he didn't sign the divorce papers. Financial transfers from a shell company linked to Volkov Global to an account in Adrian's name, payments that could be interpreted as bribes or blackmail. Surveillance footage from near Adrian's apartment showing a car registered to one of Lorenzo's legitimate businesses. None of it was real. All of it was perfectly crafted to build a narrative. This is professional, Diane said during an emergency meeting at Lorenzo's brownstone. Whoever set this up knew exactly how to construct a circumstantial case. They have means, motive, and manufactured opportunity. Can you fight it? Isabella asked. In court? Maybe. In the media? Diane shook her head. You're already convicted in public opinion. The story is too perfect. Powerful businessman helps employee escape her marriage, then eliminates the inconvenient husband. It's got everything the tabloids love. Lorenzo stood at the window, back to them, radiating controlled fury. I want names. Everyone who's tried to move against me in the last 6 months. Everyone with the resources and expertise to pull this off. That's a long list, Victor said from where he leaned against the wall. You've made a lot of enemies, Lorenzo. Then narrow it down. Who benefits most from me being arrested for murder? The room went quiet as everyone ran through mental calculations. Finally, Dmitri spoke up. The Calabresi family. They've been trying to take your shipping routes for 2 years. If you're in prison, those routes open up. Or the Volkov cousins, Victor added. They've never forgiven you for taking control of the American operations away from them. Or someone inside your organization, Marcus said quietly. Someone who wants your position and saw an opportunity. Lorenzo turned from the window, eyes flat and deadly. Start with external threats. Work inward. I want surveillance on everyone who might have orchestrated this. Phone taps, financial records, travel histories, everything. That's going to take time, Victor warned. Then work fast. Lorenzo's voice could cut glass, because if they think they can frame me for murder and walk away, they've fundamentally misunderstood who they're dealing with. The meeting dissolved into tactical discussions Isabella barely followed. She sat in the corner watching Lorenzo coordinate his counterattack, seeing the full weight of his authority on display. This was what real power looked like. Not boardrooms and business deals, violence and leverage wielded with surgical precision. After everyone left, Lorenzo found her still sitting in the corner. "You should eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry." "Isabella, did you mean it?" She looked up at him. "When you said you didn't kill Adrian?" Lorenzo crouched in front of her, taking both her hands. "I didn't kill your husband. I swear on everything I've built, everything I am, I had nothing to do with his death." "Then who did?" "I don't know. But I will find out, and when I do—" His expression turned absolutely merciless. "They'll wish they'd chosen a different way to come after me." Isabella believed him, which was either the smartest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. Over the next week, evidence continued mounting. The district attorney started making noise about bringing charges. Journalists camped outside every property Isabella had access to. Her face appeared on news broadcasts with speculation about her role in Adrian's death. And through it all, Lorenzo tore apart his organization looking for the traitor. He found the first crack 3 days later. Isabella was trying to work from the brownstone when Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, expression carved from ice. "We have a problem," he said. "Another one?" Lorenzo set the tablet on the desk in front of her. Security footage showed a man she didn't recognize entering a building at night. "That's Marcus Tate," Lorenzo said, 2 weeks before Adrian died, entering a building in Queens. "So? That building is owned by the Calabrese family. Marcus has no legitimate reason to be there." Lorenzo tapped the screen, advancing the footage. "He stays for 43 minutes, leaves carrying a briefcase he didn't bring in." Isabella's stomach churned. "You think Marcus is working with them?" "I think Marcus helped set this entire thing up. The manufactured evidence, the perfect timing, the way every piece of information leaked to investigators at exactly the right moment." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "He's been with me for 7 years. I trusted him with operational details that could destroy me." "What are you going to do?" Lorenzo's expression answered before his words did. "What I should have done the moment I suspected betrayal." "Lorenzo, wait." "No." He pulled her to her feet, hands firm on her shoulders. "Listen to me. What happens next, you cannot be part of. You cannot witness. You cannot know the details." "Why not?" "Because if this goes to trial, they'll put you on the stand, and I won't let you commit perjury for me. I won't let you become complicit in what I'm about to do." Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. "You're going to kill him. I'm going to get answers. What happens after that depends on whether those answers satisfy me." "Let me come with you." "Absolutely not." "Lorenzo?" "No, Isabella." His voice turned hard. "This is where the line is. You want to be part of my world? Fine. But you don't get to watch me become a monster, some darkness you observe from a distance. And if I refuse to be protected," Lorenzo's smile was terrible, "then I'll have Alexei lock you in this house until it's done." He meant it. Isabella could see the absolute certainty in his eyes. "How long?" she asked. 24 hours. Maybe less. "And then what?" "Then we know who really killed Adrian, and we make sure they can't hurt us again." Lorenzo kissed her once, hard and desperate and final. Then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone in the brownstone with armed security and questions that multiplied like cancer. She lasted 6 hours before breaking. Alexei found her trying to leave through the back entrance. "Miss Sinclair," his voice carried polite warning. "Mr. Vasilev gave explicit instructions." "I don't care about his instructions." "Nevertheless, I cannot allow you to leave." Isabella turned on him with fury born of helplessness. "So I'm a prisoner now? Is that what this is?" Alexei's expression didn't change. "You are protected. There is a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." "Then perhaps you are standing in the wrong place." The words landed like a slap. Isabella stared at this man, this killer who followed Lorenzo's orders without question, and saw her own future reflected back. This was what it meant to belong to Lorenzo's world, surrendering control, trusting him to make decisions about her safety, her freedom, her life. Becoming someone who waited while men did violence on her behalf. The realization settled over her like snow. "Where is he?" Isabella asked quietly. "I cannot say." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Isabella returned to the living room and waited. She called Diane for updates on the investigation, tried to work, paced, watched surveillance feeds showing nothing useful. Night fell, then midnight, then dawn. Lorenzo finally returned at 7 a.m., suit destroyed, knuckles wrapped in fresh bandages, expression absolutely empty. Isabella was waiting in the kitchen with coffee she hadn't touched. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her, some internal calculation running behind his eyes. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." Isabella gestured at the chair across from her. "Sit. Tell me what happened." "Isabella, sit." Lorenzo obeyed slowly, moving like every muscle ached. He looked exhausted and dangerous and absolutely terrifying. "Marcus is dead," he said flatly. "He gave me what I needed first, names, evidence, bank transfers, then he died. Did you kill him yourself?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." Lorenzo met her eyes. "Yes, I killed him myself. Because betrayal of this magnitude requires personal attention." Isabella absorbed this. A man was dead. Lorenzo had killed him, and she was sitting here calmly discussing it over coffee like they were talking about the weather. "What did he tell you?" she asked. "That the Calabrese family approached him 6 months ago, offered him $20 million in protection if he helped destroy me. They wanted my shipping routes, my political connections, my territory." Lorenzo's voice stayed flat and controlled. "Marcus fed them information, helped them identify Adrian as a vulnerability, suggested using your divorce as the foundation for a murder frame. So they killed Adrian." "No." Lorenzo's expression darkened. "Marcus did. On Calabrese orders. Made it look like suicide. Planted all the evidence pointing to me." He paused. "He was very thorough, very professional. If I hadn't found the surveillance footage, we never would have known." Isabella's hands trembled. She gripped her coffee cup tighter to hide it. "What happens now?" "Now I go to war," Lorenzo said simply. "The Calabrese family just made a fatal mistake, and I'm going to make sure everyone in this city understands what happens to people who come after what's mine." "Lorenzo, you need to decide something, Isabella." He leaned forward, eyes burning with intensity and exhaustion. "Right now. Before this gets worse, because it will get worse. Much worse. Decide what? If you can live with what I'm about to do, if you can stand beside me while I burn the Calabrese family to ash, if you can be my partner in something that will absolutely involve bloodshed," his voice dropped lower, "or if you need to walk away now, while you still can." The choice presented itself with brutal clarity. Stay with Lorenzo and become complicit in gang warfare. Watch him destroy his enemies with methodical violence, except that her safety required other people's death. Or leave. Return to some semblance of normal life. Let Diane protect her legally while Lorenzo fought his battles alone. Isabella thought about Adrian lying dead in his apartment, about Marcus Tate dying sometime in the last 24 hours, about the Calabrese family out there somewhere, thinking they could kill and frame and walk away clean. She thought about 3 years of suffocating in a marriage that slowly destroyed her, about finally breathing freely beside a man who saw her completely and wanted her anyway. She thought about what it meant to survive versus what it meant to actually live. The answer came with crystalline certainty. "I'm not leaving," Isabella said. Lorenzo's eyes searched hers. "You understand what that means?" "Yes." "You understand there's no going back after this? No claiming innocence? No pretending you didn't know what I was doing?" "I understand." "Isabella," she reached across the table and took his bandaged hand. "I said, I'm yours, Lorenzo. Did you think I meant it conditionally?" Something shifted in his expression. Relief and triumph and possession all tangled together. "Then we do this together." he said quietly. Together, Isabella agreed. And as morning light filtered through bulletproof windows and somewhere in the city, the Calabrese family woke up thinking they'd won, Isabella Sinclair crossed the final line that separated her old life from the one she was choosing. No more hesitation, no more doubt, just the absolute certainty that she would survive this. Even if survival meant becoming someone she never imagined she could be. War came quietly at first. The Calabrese family lost their primary shipping warehouse to a fire that investigators would later call suspicious but inconclusive. 3 days after that, 2 of their distribution centers were raided by federal agents acting on anonymous tips. A week later, their accountant disappeared along with financial records that could implicate half their organization. Lorenzo orchestrated it all from the brownstone, moving pieces across the city like a grandmaster playing chess with human lives. Isabella watched him work. She sat in on the strategy meetings now, learned the names of every major player in the city's underworld, memorized the territory maps that Victor spread across the dining table, marking contested zones in red. She stopped flinching when Lorenzo discussed eliminating problems, stopped asking questions she didn't want answered. The transformation happened so gradually she barely noticed it. One day she was a woman horrified by violence. The next, she was calmly suggesting which federal prosecutor might be vulnerable to pressure. The assistant DA handling the Calabrese cases, Isabella said during a meeting 2 weeks into the war, Jennifer Rosario. She graduated from Yale Law 3 years ahead of me. We weren't friends, but we knew each other. Lorenzo looked up from the financial reports he'd been studying. And she's ambitious, wants to make partner at a private firm eventually. That kind of ambition has a price. Victor grinned from across the table. I like how she thinks. What are you suggesting? Lorenzo asked Isabella directly. Let me talk to her. Off the record, woman to woman. See if she'd be interested in career opportunities that don't involve prosecuting cases she can't win. Dmitri frowned. That's a risk. She could record the conversation, use it as evidence of witness tampering. She could, Isabella agreed, but I don't think she will. Jennifer's smart enough to recognize when she's being offered an exit versus a threat. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. You've never done this before. No? It could go very wrong. So could everything else we're doing. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, pride mixed with concern. All right, set up the meeting. But Alexei goes with you, and you wear a wire so I can hear everything. You don't trust me? I don't trust the world not to hurt you. Lorenzo's voice softened fractionally. There's a difference. The meeting with Jennifer Rosario happened 3 days later at a coffee shop in Midtown. Isabella arrived exactly on time. Alexei stationed outside with 2 other security personnel, the wire taped against her ribs transmitting every word back to Lorenzo. Jennifer looked exactly like Isabella remembered. Sharp features, expensive suit, eyes that calculated odds constantly. She stood when Isabella approached, extending a hand. Isabella Sinclair, or is it Mercer still? Sinclair. Isabella sat across from her. Thank you for meeting me. I'll admit I was surprised to get your call. Jennifer ordered an espresso from the server, especially given that you're currently a person of interest in your ex-husband's death investigation. I didn't kill Adrian. I didn't say you did. Jennifer's gaze was clinical, though the evidence is fairly compelling. Text messages, financial transfers, motive and opportunity. If the DA decides to file charges, it'll be a strong case. Isabella kept her voice level. Hypothetically, what would make the DA decide not to file charges? Hypothetically? Jennifer smiled slightly. Lack of concrete evidence. Key witnesses recanting. Better targets emerging that require prosecutorial resources. She paused. Or the lead prosecutor deciding the case isn't winnable and isn't worth the political capital. And which prosecutor would be making that decision? On the Mercer case, me. I'm the one reviewing evidence and making recommendations. Isabella leaned forward slightly. What would it take for you to recommend against filing charges? Jennifer's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. Are you asking me to bury a murder investigation? I'm asking what it would cost for you to objectively conclude that the evidence doesn't support prosecution. That's a very expensive question, Isabella. I work for someone with expensive resources. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, stirring her espresso with mechanical precision. I assume we're talking about Lorenzo Vasilev. I assume you're smart enough not to need that confirmed. I'm also smart enough to know that taking money from organized crime tends to end badly for prosecutors. Jennifer set down her spoon. So, if we're having this conversation, and I'm not saying we are, it would need to be about more than cash. What did you have in for mind? Legitimacy. A position at a top-tier law firm, corporate defense, white-collar crime, the kind of cases that make careers. Jennifer's voice stayed carefully neutral. The kind of position that someone like Lorenzo Vasilev could facilitate through his business connections. Isabella felt the wire against her ribs, knowing Lorenzo was hearing every word. That could be arranged. Could it? Because last I checked, law firms do extensive background checks. They'd want to know why a rising prosecutor suddenly left the DA's office. You'd leave to pursue private practice, citing burnout from the public sector. Several high-profile firms would immediately offer you positions, all legitimate, all above board. Isabella held her gaze. And in return, you'd determine that the evidence against me and Lorenzo doesn't meet the threshold for prosecution. Jennifer was silent for 30 seconds. Then, I'd need guarantees. Such as? That this is a one-time arrangement, that I'm not being recruited into ongoing criminal activity, that once I make my recommendation, my involvement ends completely. Agreed. And I'd need the job offer in writing before I make any decisions about the case. Isabella nodded slowly. How long do we have before the DA makes a filing decision? 3 weeks? Maybe less if more evidence surfaces. You'll have your offer in 1 week. Jennifer finished her espresso and stood. I never agreed to anything, Isabella. This conversation was purely hypothetical. Of course. But hypothetically, if such an offer were to materialize, I'd consider it carefully. Jennifer paused at the edge of the table. One more thing, hypothetically. Yes? Tell Lorenzo Vasilev that if he's responsible for Adrian's death, I don't care how good the job offer is. I won't help him get away with murder. He's not responsible. Then we don't have a problem. Jennifer walked away without looking back. Isabella sat there for another minute, letting her heart rate settle, before standing and joining Alexei outside. In the car, she pulled out her phone. Lorenzo called within seconds. You did well, he said. Did I get what we needed? Yes. I'll have Victor handle the law firm placement. She'll get her offer by end of week. Lorenzo paused. How do you feel? Isabella considered the question honestly. She'd just bribed a prosecutor, offered career advancement in exchange for burying a murder investigation, crossed a line that separated civilians from criminals. I feel effective, she said finally. Lorenzo's laugh was low and dark. You're terrifying, Isabella Sinclair. I hope you know that. I'm learning from the best. But Jennifer Rosario was only one problem. The Calabrese family remained the primary threat, and they weren't collapsing as quickly as Lorenzo wanted. 2 days after the prosecutor meeting, Victor burst into the brownstone with blood on his shirt and fury carved into his expression. We have a situation, he announced. Lorenzo looked up from the contracts he'd been reviewing. Isabella set down the book she'd been pretending to read. They'd both learned to recognize that particular tone in Victor's voice. What happened? Lorenzo asked. The Calabrese family hit one of our transfer points, killed 3 of our people, took the shipment. Victor's jaw tightened. And they left a message. He dropped a manila envelope on the coffee table. Lorenzo opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of Isabella, leaving Volkov Global, getting into cars, walking through the city. One showed her at the coffee shop meeting Jennifer Rosario. The final photograph made Isabella's blood freeze. It showed her entering the brownstone. The angle was clear, the timestamp recent. Someone had been watching this location specifically. Lorenzo's expression went absolutely empty. When were these taken? Over the last 2 weeks. They've been tracking her movements. Victor gestured at the Rosario photograph. They know she's active in operations now. They're making sure we understand she's a target. How did they get surveillance on this property? Lorenzo's voice could cut diamonds. We sweep for devices daily. They didn't need devices. They used a spotter across the street. Telephoto lens. Low-tech and effective. Victor pulled out his phone, showing a grainy image of a man in a parked car. Alexei caught him 20 minutes ago. He's in the basement now. Isabella's stomach churned. Alive? For the moment, Victor looked at Lorenzo. What do you want me to do? Lorenzo stood slowly, every movement controlled and deliberate. I want answers. Then I want him dead. Then I want to send his body back to the Calabrese family with a very clear message about what happens when they threaten what's mine. Lorenzo, Isabella started. No. He turned to her, eyes burning. They put surveillance on you. They're threatening you to get to me. That ends tonight. What are you going to do? Whatever necessary. Lorenzo pulled on his jacket. Stay here with Alexei. Don't leave the building. Don't go near the windows. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. You said we do this together. Lorenzo crossed to where she stood and gripped her shoulders hard enough to hurt. Together doesn't mean you watch me torture information out of people. Some darkness you don't need to witness. What if I want to witness it? The words came out before Isabella could stop them. What if I need to see exactly what you're capable of? Something flickered across Lorenzo's expression. Surprise mixed with something darker. Why? Because I'm tired of being protected from reality. Because if I'm going to be your partner, I need to understand all of it, not just the strategy and the business side. Isabella held his gaze. Show me who you really are, Lorenzo. Stop hiding the monster. Victor cleared his throat. We don't have time for this. The longer we wait, the more likely he's been reported missing. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He studied Isabella for a long moment, some internal calculation running behind his eyes. Fine, he said finally. Come. But if you can't handle what you see, you don't get to unsee it later. You don't get to decide I'm too brutal or too cruel or too far gone. You asked for this. I understand. Do you? Lorenzo's voice turned hard. Because I'm about to hurt someone very badly to get information. And I'm not going to stop when he screams. I'm not going to show mercy, and when I'm done, I'm going to kill him. Can you watch that and still look at me the same way? Isabella thought about Adrian dead in his apartment, about Marcus Tate dying somewhere she'd never know, about 3 weeks of war that had already cost lives she couldn't count. Yes, she said, I can. Lorenzo searched her face one more time. Then he nodded once. Victor, let's go. The basement beneath the brownstone looked nothing like the elegant living spaces above. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, a single chair in the center of the room bolted to the floor. And tied to that chair, bleeding from his mouth, sat a man in his 30s wearing the remnants of what had been a nice suit. Alexei stood against the wall, knuckles split, expression neutral. 2 other security personnel flanked the exits. The man in the chair looked up as Lorenzo entered. His eyes widened with recognition and fear. Mr. Vasilev, shut up. Lorenzo's voice cut through the space like wire. He circled the chair slowly, studying the man from every angle. What's your name? Paul. Paul Hendricks. Who do you work for, Paul? I'm a freelance photographer. I was just... Lorenzo's fist connected with Paul's jaw before Isabella even saw him move. The crack echoed off concrete, blood sprayed. Paul's head snapped sideways. Let's try again, Lorenzo said calmly. Who do you work for? Paul spat blood. Fuck you. This time Lorenzo hit him in the ribs. Isabella heard something crack. Paul screamed. I have all night, Lorenzo said, and significantly more creative methods than simple beating. So I'll ask one more time. Who hired you to photograph Isabella Sinclair? Paul was crying now, trying to breathe through what were probably broken ribs. The Calabrese family, they wanted surveillance, routines, vulnerabilities. Who's your contact? Anthony Calabrese. He hired me directly. Lorenzo glanced at Victor, who nodded confirmation. Anthony Calabrese was the youngest son, known for being impulsive and violent. What were your orders? Lorenzo asked. Just photography. Document her movements. Report back daily. What else? Nothing, I swear. Just pictures. Lorenzo pulled out a knife. Isabella's breath caught. The blade caught light, gleaming. I don't believe you, Lorenzo said quietly. He pressed the knife against Paul's hand where it was tied to the chair. Let's see if we can improve your honesty. Wait, Jesus, okay. Paul was hyperventilating. They wanted to know when she was alone. When security was light, times she might be vulnerable. For what purpose? I don't know. They didn't tell me. I just provided intel. Lorenzo increased pressure on the knife. Blood welled up around the blade. Paul screamed. What? Purpose? Lorenzo's voice stayed absolutely level. Kidnapping. They wanted to grab her, use her as leverage against you, force you to back off the territory war. That's all I know. I swear to God. Lorenzo removed the knife, wiped it clean on Paul's shirt, looked at Isabella where she stood frozen near the entrance. You wanted to see who I really am, he said. Here it is. A man who will cut pieces off anyone who threatens you until they tell me everything I need to know. His eyes never left hers. Still want to stay? Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands shook. Everything in her rational mind screamed to run, to get out, to escape before she became complicit in torture and murder. But beneath the horror, beneath the fear, something else pulsed. The absolute certainty that Lorenzo would do this for her, that his brutality served a purpose, that in his world, mercy was weakness and violence was protection. Yes, she said, her voice barely shook. I still want to stay. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression, approval mixed with regret. He turned back to Paul. Thank you for your cooperation. Unfortunately, you've seen too much to walk away from this. No, please. I told you everything. I'm just a freelancer. I won't say anything, please. Lorenzo shot him. One bullet, center mass, professional and efficient. Paul's begging cut off mid-word. His body slumped in the chair, blood pooled on concrete. Isabella stood very still, watching life drain from a man she'd never met. A man who died because he took photographs of her for money. Lorenzo handed the gun to Alexei. Clean this up. Send the body to Anthony Calabrese with a note. Tell him that anyone who comes near Isabella dies. No warnings, no second chances. Yes, sir. Lorenzo crossed to where Isabella stood frozen. Let's go upstairs. She followed mechanically, mind trying to process what she'd just witnessed. They climbed to the living room in silence. Lorenzo poured vodka with steady hands, gave her a glass. Drink. Isabella obeyed. The alcohol burned but didn't help. I killed him, Lorenzo said quietly, because letting him live meant risking you. It's that simple. In my world, threats get eliminated, permanently. I know. Do you? Lorenzo moved closer. Because you look like you're in shock. I am in shock. I just watched you torture and murder someone. Isabella's hand shook hard enough that vodka sloshed in the glass. But I'm not leaving. I'm not running. I'm just processing. Lorenzo took the glass from her before she dropped it. You don't have to be okay with this. I'm not okay with it, but I understand why it happened. Isabella looked up at him. They were planning to kidnap me, use me against you. That man helped facilitate that plan. So yes, I understand why he had to die. That's not the same as accepting it. Then I'll work on acceptance. Isabella felt something fundamental shifting inside her chest. But I'm not naive enough to think violence isn't necessary sometimes. Not anymore. Lorenzo pulled her against him, one hand in her hair, the other wrapped around her waist. You're changing, adapting to this world faster than anyone I've ever seen. It should terrify me. But it doesn't? No, it makes me want you more. Isabella tilted her head up. Even knowing I just watched you kill someone and didn't run? Especially knowing that. Lorenzo's mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted like vodka and violence and 3 years of compressed wanting. You're perfect for me, Isabella, and that's the most terrifying thing of all. They broke apart, breathing hard. Isabella's mind spun through implications. The Calabrese family knows I'm involved now, she said. They know I'm not just your girlfriend. I'm operational. Yes. So they'll come harder, more direct. Yes. What do we do? Lorenzo's expression went cold and calculated. We stop being reactive. We go on offense. Hit them where it hurts most before they can execute whatever plan they're building. Where's that? Their money. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and sent a text. Victor's been working with our financial people. We've identified 3 primary accounts the Calabrese family uses for operations. If we freeze those accounts, we cripple their ability to function. Can you do that? I can do anything with the right leverage. Lorenzo made a call. Get me Daniel Ross. A pause. I don't care what meeting he's in. Get him now. Isabella listened as Lorenzo negotiated with what sounded like a banking executive. Threats wrapped in polite language. Favors called in. Pressure applied with surgical precision. By the end of the call, 3 accounts containing approximately $40 million had been frozen pending investigation into suspicious activity. That'll buy us 48 hours, Lorenzo said. Maybe less. The Calabrese family will scramble to move assets, but it creates chaos. And chaos creates opportunities. Over the next 2 days, Lorenzo's organization moved with coordinated brutality. Supply lines disrupted, key lieutenants arrested on outstanding warrants that had been strategically ignored until now. The Calabrese family's lawyer found himself disbarred based on ethics complaints filed anonymously. Isabella participated in all of it. She made calls to contacts in legitimate business, applying social pressure. She identified vulnerabilities in the Calabrese family's public-facing operations. She became the strategic mind behind attacks that looked legal but functioned as warfare. And through it all, Lorenzo watched her transformation with something between pride and concern. On the 3rd night, Victor arrived with news that changed everything. "We found Anthony Calabrese," he announced. "He's at a warehouse in Red Hook, private meeting with distributors. Light security because he thinks we're too busy defending to attack." Lorenzo's expression sharpened. "How many men?" "6 total. Anthony plus 5 security personnel." "And you're certain?" "We have eyes on the location now. He's definitely there." Lorenzo looked at Isabella. "This is it. The opening we've been waiting for. If we take Anthony, we cripple their leadership. Force them to negotiate or collapse entirely." "What do you need me to do?" Isabella asked. "Stay here. This is going to be violent." "No." Isabella stood. "You said we do this together. I'm coming." "Isabella, they were planning to kidnap me, Lorenzo. Use me as leverage. I have just as much right to be there when you eliminate that threat as you do." Victor cleared his throat. "We need to move soon. The meeting won't last long." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. He studied Isabella with clear conflict in his eyes. "If you come, you follow orders absolutely. You stay in the car with Alexei. You don't leave the vehicle for any reason. Understood?" "Understood." "I mean it, Isabella. This isn't negotiable." "I said I understand." They mobilized within 20 minutes. 3 black SUVs filled with armed men converged on Red Hook, like wolves closing on prey. Isabella sat in the middle vehicle between Alexei and Lorenzo, heart hammering, hands clenched into fists. The warehouse district was dark and industrial, perfect for violence that needed to happen away from witnesses. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He read the message and smiled, sharp and predatory. "They're still inside. Victor's team is in position. We move in 3 minutes." Isabella watched through tinted windows as men checked weapons with professional efficiency. This was really happening. She was sitting in a car about to witness a coordinated attack designed to kidnap or kill the heir to a criminal empire. "Last chance," Lorenzo said quietly. "I can still send you back to the brownstone." "No." He studied her face one more time. Then he leaned over and kissed her hard. "If anything goes wrong, Alexei gets you out. No arguments, no heroics. You survive. Understood?" "Lorenzo, promise me." Isabella looked into his eyes and saw fear beneath the control. He was genuinely worried that she might die tonight, that bringing her into his world might cost her everything. "I promise," she said. Lorenzo nodded once. Then he stepped out of the vehicle and into the night. Isabella watched through the window as Lorenzo's men surrounded the warehouse with military precision. Victor led one team toward the main entrance. Dmitri took another around back. Lorenzo moved toward a side door with 3 heavily armed security personnel. Everything happened fast. Gunfire erupted inside the warehouse, sharp cracks echoing off metal and concrete. Shouting, more shots, the controlled chaos of professional violence. Isabella's nails dug into her palms. Beside her, Alexei listened to radio chatter through an earpiece, expression neutral. "What's happening?" she asked. "They've engaged. Calabrese security is down. Anthony is attempting to flee through the back exit." "Is Lorenzo okay?" "So far." More gunfire. Isabella flinched at each shot. Her mind conjured terrible images. Lorenzo bleeding on concrete. Lorenzo shot. Lorenzo dying while she sat helplessly in a car. Then Alexei's radio crackled. We have him. Target secured. 2 wounded on our side, no fatalities. Bringing him out now. Relief flooded through Isabella so powerfully she felt dizzy. She watched as Lorenzo's men emerged from the warehouse dragging someone between them. Anthony Calabrese, bloodied and fighting. They threw him into the back of one of the SUVs. Lorenzo appeared last, suit jacket gone, shirt sleeve torn and stained with blood that didn't look like his. He climbed into Isabella's vehicle and the convoy moved immediately. Are you hurt? Isabella asked, reaching for him. It's not my blood. Lorenzo's eyes were bright and dangerous. We got him. Anthony fucking Calabrese, the key to ending this war. Isabella looked at the SUV ahead carrying their prisoner. What happens now? Lorenzo's smile was absolutely merciless. Now we have a conversation about the terms of his family's surrender. They drove to an industrial location Isabella didn't recognize. Inside, Anthony Calabrese was tied to a chair in a room that looked designed specifically for interrogation. Lorenzo pulled Isabella aside before entering. This is going to be worse than what you saw with Paul, much worse. Anthony won't break easily. Are you sure you want to witness this? Isabella thought about Adrian's death, about weeks of war, about the surveillance photos showing her every movement, about living under constant threat because the Calabrese family wanted Lorenzo's territory. I'm sure, she said. They entered the room together. Anthony looked up as they approached. Even beaten and restrained, he radiated violence and arrogance. Blood dripped from his nose. His left eye was already swelling shut. Lorenzo Vasilev, he said, finally showing yourself instead of hiding behind lawyers and frozen bank accounts. Anthony. Lorenzo circled the chair slowly. You've been causing me significant problems. Just business, nothing personal. It became personal when you had someone photograph my partner, when you planned to kidnap her. Anthony's swollen eye found Isabella. That her, the secretary? Heard you were fucking the help these days. Lorenzo's fist connected with Anthony's jaw before Isabella even saw him move. The crack was sickening. More blood. Careful with your next words, Lorenzo said quietly. They might be your last. Anthony spat blood. You won't kill me. My family would burn this city down. Your family is currently scrambling to function without access to their primary operating accounts. 3 of your distribution centers are shut down. Your lawyer is disbarred. Half your political contacts won't return calls. Lorenzo leaned close. Your family is collapsing, Anthony, and you're going to help me finish the job. Go to hell. Lorenzo pulled out his phone, showed Anthony something that made his expression change from defiant to terrified. That's your sister, Lorenzo said calmly. Maria Calabrese, currently at her apartment in Murray Hill. She has 2 security guards. I have 20 men positioned around the building. Anthony's breathing accelerated. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. The question is whether you're going to make me. Lorenzo pocketed the phone. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your father. Tell him that continuing this war will cost him everything he loves. That I will systematically destroy every member of your family until he surrenders territory and operations to me. He won't negotiate. Then you'll all die, and I'll build my empire on your ashes. Lorenzo's voice stayed absolutely level. Your choice, Anthony. Make the call and live. Refuse and watch your family burn. Isabella stood against the wall, watching this unfold, her heart a trapped animal in her chest. This was what real power looked like. Not money or influence. The willingness to threaten families, to burn everything, to be more brutal than your enemies. Anthony stared at Lorenzo for a long moment, then his shoulders sagged. Give me the phone, he said quietly. Lorenzo dialed and handed it over, put it on speaker. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Anthony, where the hell are you? I'm with Lorenzo Vasilev, Anthony said, voice thick from broken teeth. He wants to negotiate. Silence. Then, put him on. Put him. Lorenzo took the phone. Mr. Calabrese, I have your son. I have surveillance on your daughter, and I have the resources to dismantle your organization piece by piece. So here's my offer. You withdraw from all contested territory. You forfeit your shipping operations in New York. You pay reparations for my people you've killed. And in exchange, your family lives. And if I refuse? Then in 24 hours, you'll have no family left alive to lead. More silence. Isabella could hear breathing on the other end, calculations being made, pride fighting against survival instinct. Finally, I need to discuss this with my people. You have 12 hours. Lorenzo hung up. He looked at Anthony. You just saved your family's life. Try to remember that when you're angry about what comes next. What comes next? Anthony asked. Lorenzo's smile was terrifying. You stay here. Insurance against your father making stupid decisions. They left Anthony in that room with armed guards and drove back to the brownstone as dawn broke over the city. In the car, Lorenzo took Isabella's hand. How are you holding up? I don't know. She stared at their intertwined fingers. I just watched you threaten to murder someone's entire family, watched you torture their son, participated in gang warfare. Her voice cracked. And the worst part is I don't feel as horrified as I should. What do you feel? Isabella considered the question honestly. Relief. That you're alive, that this might finally be over, that we might actually win. Lorenzo lifted her hand to his lips. You've become exactly what I knew you could be. Strong enough to survive in my world, ruthless enough to do what's necessary. Is that a good thing? I don't know, Lorenzo said quietly, but it's the truth. They spent the next 12 hours in tense waiting. Lorenzo coordinated with his people, preparing for both surrender and continued war. Isabella tried to work but couldn't focus. Every minute that passed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to see if the ground would hold. At hour 11, Lorenzo's phone rang. Mr. Calabrese's voice came through cold and defeated. We accept your terms, draft the agreement, we'll sign. Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly. Smart choice. This isn't over, Vasilev. Yes, it is. Because if your family ever moves against me or mine again, there won't be negotiations. There will only be funerals. Lorenzo's voice turned to ice. Are we clear? Crystal. The line went dead. Lorenzo set down the phone and looked at Isabella. For the first time in weeks, his expression softened. It's done, he said. We won? We won. Isabella felt something release in her chest. Tension that had been building for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She crossed to where Lorenzo stood and wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. What happens to Anthony? She asked. I'll return him tomorrow, beaten and humiliated, but alive. A reminder of what mercy looks like in my world. They stood there in the brownstone holding each other as the city woke up outside. Somewhere, the Calabrese family was signing away their empire. Somewhere, Adrian's ghost finally stopped haunting Isabella's nightmares. Somewhere, the war that had consumed weeks of their lives finally burned itself out. We should sleep, Lorenzo said quietly. I don't think I can. Then come with me. He led her upstairs to his bedroom, a space she'd never entered before. Sparse furniture, bookshelves lining the walls, a bed that looked barely used. They lay down together fully clothed, tangled in each other, too exhausted for anything except holding on. Isabella, Lorenzo whispered into her hair, I need you to understand something. What? You've crossed lines tonight you can never uncross. You've become complicit in violence. If anyone ever investigates what happened, you'll be charged alongside me. I know. You could still walk away, claim coercion, make a deal with prosecutors. Isabella pulled back enough to look at his face. Is that what you want? For me to walk away? No, I want you beside me, always. But I need you to choose that with full understanding of what it means. Isabella thought about everything that had happened, about the woman she used to be, careful, conflict avoidant, small. About the woman she'd become, strategic, ruthless, capable of watching torture without running. She thought about Lorenzo, criminal, killer, man who would threaten entire families to protect her. I choose you, she said simply. All of you, the darkness included. Lorenzo kissed her then, soft and almost reverent, like she was something precious instead of something he'd corrupted. Then you're mine, he whispered, completely. No going back. No going back, Isabella agreed. And as sunlight filtered through bulletproof windows and somewhere in the city, the Calabrese family mourned their defeat, Isabella Sinclair finally understood what she'd become. Not a victim, not a refugee from a bad marriage, but a queen standing beside a king in an empire built on blood and loyalty and the absolute certainty that together they were unstoppable. The war was over, but their reign was just beginning. The Calabrese family signed the agreement 3 days later in a conference room that smelled like fear and expensive cologne. Mr. Calabrese himself attended, a man in his 70s with eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by more. He sat across from Lorenzo with the posture of someone swallowing poison, because the alternative was worse. Isabella stood behind Lorenzo's chair, watching every signature, every clause that transferred power from one criminal empire to another. The lawyers spoke in careful euphemisms. Territory became regional business interests. Protection rackets became security consulting agreements. Money laundering operations became financial service partnerships. But everyone in that room understood exactly what was happening. The Calabrese family was surrendering. Lorenzo Vasiliev had won. When the final signature dried on expensive paper, Mr. Calabrese looked at Lorenzo with something between hatred and grudging respect. "You made powerful enemies today," he said quietly. "I made powerful subjects," Lorenzo corrected. "There's a difference." Mr. Calabrese's gaze shifted to Isabella. "And you, the secretary who became a queen, you think you know what you've gotten into?" "I know exactly what I've gotten into," Isabella said. Her voice didn't shake. "Do you know what you're walking away from?" Something flickered across the old man's expression. "I'm walking away alive. That's more than most people get when they go to war with Lorenzo Vasiliev." He stood slowly, every movement showing his age. "But wars don't really end, Miss Sinclair. They just pause. Remember that when you're sleeping in his bed and making decisions that cost lives." He left without another word, taking his lawyers and his diminished empire with him. In the silence after, Lorenzo turned to Isabella. "How does it feel? Victory? No. Power." Isabella considered the question honestly. 3 months ago, she'd been a secretary scheduling meetings and pretending her marriage wasn't dying. Now she stood in a room where criminal empires changed hands and men feared her judgment. "It feels like wearing someone else's skin," she said finally. "Like I know all the movements but haven't quite accepted this is who I am now." Lorenzo stood and pulled her into his arms. "You'll accept it eventually. They all do." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be honest." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Let's go home." Home was the brownstone now. Isabella had officially moved her remaining possessions from the penthouse, filling Lorenzo's spaces with her books and clothes and the small pieces of identity she'd salvaged from her marriage. They existed in a strange domestic rhythm. Mornings reviewing operations over coffee, afternoons managing legitimate business, evenings entertaining the kind of people who smiled with too many teeth and calculated odds while shaking hands. 2 weeks after the Calabrese surrender, Diane Kovach arrived with news that changed everything. She sat in Lorenzo's study looking uncomfortable in a way that made Isabella's stomach drop. "The DA's office officially closed the investigation into Adrian's death," Diane said. "Jennifer Rosario recommended no charges, cited insufficient evidence and conflicting witness statements." Relief should have flooded through Isabella. Instead, she felt nothing except hollow exhaustion. "That's good news," Lorenzo said carefully. "So why do you look like someone died?" "Because Jennifer's boss didn't agree with her recommendation. He wanted to pursue charges anyway." Diane pulled out a folder. "Jennifer fought him, hard, threatened to resign if he overruled her professional judgment. Eventually he backed down. But there was a cost." "What cost?" Isabella asked. "Jennifer Rosario submitted her resignation this morning, effective immediately." Diane slid the folder across the desk. "She took a position at Kirkland and Ellis, corporate defense. Exactly what we promised her." Isabella stared at the folder without opening it. "So she kept her word." "She kept her word," Diane confirmed. "Even when it meant career suicide at the DA's office. Even when her boss tried to force her to prosecute. She stood firm and protected you both." Diane paused. "I thought you should know that. What it cost her to make that choice." After Diane left, Isabella sat in the study feeling something heavy settling in her chest. Jennifer Rosario had sacrificed her entire career in public service to honor an agreement made over hypothetical coffee. She'd stood between Isabella and prosecution, taken the professional hit, and walked away to private practice. "She did the right thing," Lorenzo said quietly. "Did she?" Or did we corrupt her into doing what benefited us? Does the distinction matter? Isabella looked at him. It should, shouldn't it? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. In my world, results matter more than intentions. Jennifer got what she wanted, a lucrative position at a top firm. We got what we needed. The investigation closed. Everyone wins. Except the part where she abandoned her principles. Maybe she didn't have those principles as firmly as you think. Maybe she just needed permission to pursue what she actually wanted. Lorenzo moved to where Isabella sat. You can't save everyone's soul, Isabella. Sometimes people make choices because they want to, not because we force them. Isabella wanted to argue, wanted to believe there was a meaningful difference between corruption and opportunity. But the words died in her throat because she'd made similar choices herself. She'd chosen Lorenzo, chosen his world, chosen to participate in violence and bribery and warfare. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being able to see a clear line between who she used to be and who she'd become. That night, Isabella stood on the balcony where this had all started. Different building, same snow falling, same city sprawling below like a kingdom of broken promises. Lorenzo found her there an hour later. You're thinking too much, he said. Someone should. Isabella didn't turn around. We destroyed lives, Lorenzo. Adrian's dead. Jennifer's career is permanently altered. The Calabrese family lost everything. Marcus Tate is dead, that photographer. How many others? 7 total, including collateral damage. The number landed like a stone. 7 people died because I left my husband. 7 people died because they made choices that put them in opposition to me. You didn't kill them, Isabella. I did. Does that distinction matter? Lorenzo moved to stand beside her. Yes, because I need you to understand something. The violence I'm capable of, the decisions I make, the lines I cross, those are mine. You participate, you strategize, you enable, but the blood is on my hands, not yours. That's not how the law sees it. Fuck the law. I'm telling you how I see it. Lorenzo turned her to face him. You want to carry guilt for what happened? Fine. But don't carry guilt for things I chose to do. Don't take responsibility for my darkness. How can I not? I'm with you. I chose this. You chose me. Not every consequence that comes with me. His hands framed her face. There's a difference between being my partner and being my accomplice. Learn it, because if you can't separate the two, this will destroy you. Isabella searched his face. Does it destroy you, knowing what you've done? Every day. Lorenzo's voice dropped to something raw and honest. I sleep 4 hours a night because the other 4 I spend remembering faces, names, people I've killed or ordered killed. It doesn't go away, Isabella. You just learn to function with it. And you think I can learn that too? I know you can, because you're stronger than I was when I started. He pressed his forehead to hers. But I need you to decide something right now. Are you staying because you want to? Or because you think you don't have a choice anymore? The question cut through everything. Isabella had been avoiding it for weeks, burying it under strategy and survival and the adrenaline of warfare. But standing here in the falling snow, with Lorenzo's eyes searching hers, she couldn't hide anymore. Did she want this life, or was she just too far gone to escape it? I don't know, she whispered. Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Then figure it out, because I won't keep you here if you're only staying out of fear or obligation. He stepped back, giving her space. You want to leave? I'll make sure you land safely. New identity, new city, enough money to start over. You want to stay? Then commit fully. No more guilt, no more second guessing, just the choice. How long do I have? As long as you need. He walked back inside, leaving Isabella alone with the snow and the city and the weight of everything she'd become. She spent the next 3 days in a strange limbo. Lorenzo gave her space, conducting business from other locations, sleeping in the penthouse instead of the brownstone. Alexei maintained security, but kept his distance. Isabella existed in silence, turning the question over and over in her mind. Who was she now? Not the woman who'd married Adrian Mercer hoping for stability and partnership. That version died the night of the Christmas Gala. Not the naive employee who'd thought working for Lorenzo Vasilev was just a job. That illusion shattered the moment he'd revealed how long he'd been watching her. Not the victim who'd needed rescuing from a bad marriage. She'd participated in too much violence, made too many calculated decisions, chosen this path too deliberately to claim victimhood. So who did that leave? Isabella stared at herself in the bathroom mirror on the third night, studying her reflection like a stranger. Same face, same dark hair, same eyes that had once held certainty about right and wrong. But everything behind those eyes had fundamentally changed. She thought about her mother in Connecticut, living in comfortable denial about her own compromised marriage. About Jennifer Rosario in her new corporate position, pretending the transition was about opportunity instead of corruption. About all the people who told themselves pretty lies to justify their choices. Isabella was done with pretty lies. The truth was simpler and uglier and more honest than any narrative she could construct. She wanted this life. Wanted Lorenzo with his brutal honesty and his absolute devotion and his willingness to burn the world down for her. Wanted the power that came from standing beside someone who shaped the city's criminal infrastructure. Wanted the clarity of a world where survival meant being more ruthless than your enemies. She wasn't staying because she had no choice. She was staying because this was the first time in her entire life she'd felt fully alive. That realization should have horrified her. Instead, it felt like finally breathing. Isabella called Lorenzo at midnight. He answered on the first ring. "I'm staying," she said. Silence. Then, "You're sure?" "Completely." "Why?" "Because I love you. And because this life with you is more honest than anything I ever had before." Isabella's voice steadied. "I'm not innocent, Lorenzo. I'm not a victim. I'm choosing this with full understanding of what it means. And the guilt? I'll carry it like you do, and I'll function with it." She paused. "But I'm done apologizing for who I've become." Lorenzo exhaled something that sounded like relief. "I'm coming home." He arrived 20 minutes later. They met in the living room like adversaries preparing for negotiation, but the moment Lorenzo saw her expression, his carefully controlled demeanor cracked. He crossed to where she stood and kissed her with 3 years of compressed wanting finally released from restraint. Isabella kissed him back with equal intensity, feeling every barrier between them finally collapse. "Upstairs," Lorenzo breathed against her mouth. "Yes." They barely made it to the bedroom. Clothes discarded in a trail across hardwood floors, hands relearning topography through skin instead of fabric. Lorenzo's control shattered completely, replaced by raw need that matched her own. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets with the city glittering beyond bulletproof windows, both breathing hard, both fundamentally changed by the choice Isabella had finally made. "No going back now," Lorenzo said quietly. Isabella traced patterns across his chest, feeling his heartbeat against her palm. "There was never any going back. I think I knew that the night you offered me protection. You could have chosen differently." "No, I couldn't. Not really." She looked up at him. "You saw who I could become before I did. That's why you waited 3 years. You knew eventually I'd be ready for this." Lorenzo's fingers tangled in her hair. "And are you ready?" "I think I've been ready since the moment I watched you shoot that photographer and didn't run." Isabella's voice carried something new, certainty without apology. "I'm yours, Lorenzo, completely, the darkness included." "Then I'm yours too." He pulled her closer. "Everything I've built, everything I am, it's ours now." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the weight of their choices settling into something like peace. Morning came with coffee and newspapers and the kind of domestic normalcy that would have been absurd to anyone who knew what they'd done to achieve it. Lorenzo spread the business section across the kitchen table while Isabella checked email on her laptop. They looked like any successful couple managing their respective careers. Nobody observing would have guessed they'd spent the last 3 months engaged in warfare that left bodies in its wake. "Victor wants to discuss expansion into New Jersey," Lorenzo said, scanning headlines. "The Calabrese surrender left a vacuum. Other organizations are positioning to fill it. What's his recommendation? Move fast. Establish presence before anyone else consolidates power." Isabella considered it. "That risks triggering exactly the kind of conflict we just finished. Maybe we let the territory stay fragmented. Less organized crime means less competition." Lorenzo looked up with something like pride. "That's good strategic thinking. You're learning." "I have an excellent teacher." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Isabella almost ignored it, then recognized the area code. Connecticut. Her mother. Isabella stared at the screen for 3 rings before answering. Hello? Isabella. Her mother's voice came through tight with disapproval. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I've been busy. Too busy to call your own mother? A pause laden with judgment. I saw the news about Adrian, about the investigation being closed. And? And I want to know if you had anything to do with his death. The accusation landed exactly as intended. Isabella felt rage spike hot and immediate. You think I killed my husband? I think you left him for another man and 2 weeks later Adrian was dead. I think the timing is suspicious, and I think you've changed into someone I don't recognize. Isabella laughed, sharp and bitter. You never recognized me, Mom. You just wanted me to be a smaller, quieter version of what you thought was acceptable. That's not fair. Fair? Isabella's voice turned cold. You called to accuse me of murder. Don't talk to me about fair. I'm trying to understand what happened to my daughter. The Isabella I knew would never... The Isabella you knew was suffocating. She was small and scared and pretending to be happy while her husband cheated and her mother criticized, and everyone expected her to smile and accept it. Isabella's hands shook. That Isabella is gone, dead, and I'm not mourning her. Silence crashed down the line. Then her mother's voice, smaller. What have you become? Someone who stopped apologizing for wanting more. Isabella looked across the table at Lorenzo, who was watching her with quiet intensity. I'm happy, Mom. For the first time in my entire life, I'm actually happy. And if you can't accept that, then we have nothing more to discuss. Isabella. She hung up, blocked the number, set down the phone with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Lorenzo reached across the table and took her hand. You okay? Yeah. Isabella felt something release in her chest. I really am. She just severed the last connection to her old life. No more pretending to be the daughter her mother wanted. No more apologizing for choices that led her here. Just the clean, brutal honesty of accepting who she'd become. My mother thinks I'm a murderer, Isabella said quietly. Everyone from my old life probably does. The woman who left her husband and he died mysteriously 2 weeks later. Does it bother you what they think? No. The answer came easier than expected. They don't know the truth. They'll never know it. And I don't owe them explanations. Lorenzo lifted her hand to his lips. You're magnificent when you stop caring what other people think. I learned from watching you. Over the next 6 months, Isabella settled fully into her role beside Lorenzo. She stopped pretending to be just his girlfriend and became his actual partner in every sense. She sat in on high-level negotiations, made decisions about territorial boundaries, developed relationships with key players in Lorenzo's organization. Victor started calling her Koroleva, Queen in Russian. The name stuck. Within weeks, everyone in Lorenzo's empire understood that Isabella's word carried the same weight as Lorenzo's. She also started legitimate projects, a charitable foundation that provided resources to women leaving abusive relationships, educational programs for at-risk youth, community development in neighborhoods that Lorenzo's operations inadvertently impacted. Conscience money, Victor called it one evening over drinks. Survival strategy, Isabella corrected. We make enemies through criminal operations. We build goodwill through charity. It's balance. Lorenzo smiled into his vodka. She thinks like a chess player now. Because you taught me the board. The foundation became Isabella's primary focus, the place where she channeled guilt into something productive. She couldn't undo the violence that had brought her here, couldn't resurrect Adrian or Marcus or any of the others, but she could help other women escape situations she recognized too well. One afternoon, 8 months after Adrian's death, Isabella was reviewing grant applications when her assistant knocked. There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. Isabella looked up. Who? Rachel Morrison. The name hit like a fist. Adrian's mistress, the woman whose apartment Isabella had tracked him to the night everything changed. Send her in, Isabella said. Rachel looked smaller than Isabella had imagined. Blonde, pretty, young, probably late 20s. She wore a dress that cost too much for a marketing salary, and eyes that had cried recently. "Miss Sinclair," Rachel said quietly, "thank you for seeing me." "Why are you here, Rachel?" "Because I need to apologize, face to face." Rachel's hands twisted together. "I knew Adrian was married. I knew what we were doing was wrong. And I did it anyway because he told me you didn't love him anymore, that the marriage was over." "It was over," Isabella said flatly, "just not for the reasons he claimed. I know that now. After he died, I found messages on his phone, dozens of them. Other women, other affairs. I was just one in a series." Rachel's voice cracked. "He lied to both of us." Isabella felt something unexpected, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. They'd both been pieces in Adrian's game, both manipulated, both betrayed. "What do you want from me?" Isabella asked. "Nothing. Just to say, I'm sorry for my part in destroying your marriage." Rachel swallowed hard. "And to tell you that whatever people say about you and Adrian's death, I don't believe it. I know you didn't kill him." "How do you know that?" "Because I saw you at that Christmas gala. You looked devastated, not angry, not vengeful, just heartbroken." Rachel's eyes glistened. Someone who felt that much pain doesn't turn around and commit murder 2 weeks later. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so sharp. Rachel was defending Isabella based on a misreading of that night. Isabella hadn't been heartbroken. She'd been furious and calculating and already planning her exit, but she let Rachel keep her narrative. "Thank you for coming," Isabella said. "I appreciate the apology." Rachel nodded and left. Isabella sat alone in her office, staring at grant applications she could no longer focus on. That night she told Lorenzo about the encounter. "Do you think she suspected anything?" he asked. "No, she bought the grieving wife story." Isabella poured wine with steady hands. "It's strange. She came to apologize for the affair, but the affair was the best thing that could have happened to me. It gave me the excuse to leave, to find you." Lorenzo pulled her into his arms. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" Isabella thought about Adrian dead, about the violence and corruption and lines she'd crossed, about becoming someone her old friends wouldn't recognize and her mother openly condemned. "No," she said honestly, "I don't regret any of it." "Not even the cost?" "Especially not the cost. Nothing worth having comes cheap." A year after the Christmas gala that changed everything, Lorenzo took Isabella to dinner at an exclusive restaurant that required reservations months in advance. They sat in a private room overlooking the city, drinking wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Halfway through dessert, Lorenzo reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Isabella's breath caught. "Before you panic," Lorenzo said, "this isn't a proposal. Not exactly." "What is it then?" He opened the box. Inside sat a ring, platinum band with a single flawless diamond, elegant and understated and clearly worth a fortune. "It's a promise," Lorenzo said, "that when you're ready, when the divorce is final and enough time has passed, that people stop counting months, I'm going to ask you to marry me. And I'm going to keep asking until you say yes." Isabella stared at the ring, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. "You want to marry me. I want to build an empire with you, legal and illegal. Legitimate businesses and shadow operations. Everything I have, everything I'll build, I want it to be ours." Lorenzo's eyes met hers. "So yes, Isabella, eventually I want to marry you." People will talk. The widow who married her boss less than 2 years after her husband died mysteriously. Let them talk. I stopped caring about other people's opinions the moment I decided I wanted you. Isabella looked at this man who'd corrupted her and protected her and seen exactly who she could become. Who'd waited 3 years for permission to pursue her. Who'd gone to war for her. Who'd given her power and freedom and absolute honesty. "Ask me now," she said quietly. Lorenzo's expression shifted. "Isabella, ask me now. Because I don't care about timing or appearances or what people will say." She held his gaze. "I know what I want, and I'm done waiting for permission to take it." Lorenzo set down the box and took both her hands. "Isabella Sinclair, will you marry me? Will you stand beside me as my partner, my equal, my queen? Will you build this empire with me and accept everything that comes with it?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "To all of it, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. Perfect fit. Like he'd known her measurements the same way he'd known everything else about her, through observation and patience and absolute focus. They were married 6 weeks later in a private ceremony that attracted exactly the kind of attention Lorenzo had predicted. Society pages speculated. Tabloids ran unflattering headlines. Her mother didn't attend. Isabella wore ivory silk and carried no flowers. Lorenzo wore black and looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Victor gave a toast in Russian that made half the guests uncomfortable. Diane Kovac attended, along with Jennifer Rosario, who'd become an unexpected friend through their shared understanding of complicated choices. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes. The celebration went until dawn. And when Isabella finally stood on yet another balcony watching the sun rise over Manhattan, Lorenzo's ring heavy on her finger and her entire life fundamentally different than anything she'd imagined, she felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Any regrets?" Lorenzo asked, appearing behind her with champagne. Isabella considered the question one final time. Thought about everything she'd lost. Innocence, old relationships, the version of herself that believed in clean moral lines. Thought about everything she'd gained. Power, partnership, purpose. "Not one," she said. Lorenzo wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Good. Because this is forever, Isabella. No divorce. No escape clauses. You're mine until one of us dies." Sounds perfect. They stood there watching the city wake up beneath them. This kingdom they'd built together through violence and strategy and absolute commitment to each other. Somewhere below, people were waking up to normal lives, jobs they tolerated, relationships they'd settled for. Small compromises that accumulated into suffocation. Isabella had chosen differently. She'd chosen the fall, chosen the darkness, chosen a man who'd shown her exactly what she was capable of becoming and loved her for it anyway. Years later, people would still whisper about Isabella Vasilev, the secretary who became a queen, the widow who married a monster, the woman who stood beside Lorenzo Vasilev and never flinched from what that required. They'd speculate about whether she was victim or villain, whether she'd been corrupted or awakened, whether her choices made her complicit or just practical. Isabella stopped caring about those questions. She knew the truth, had known it since that night on the balcony when Lorenzo first offered her freedom, and she'd chosen him instead. She wasn't a victim who fell into a dangerous world. She was a woman who finally stopped apologizing for wanting power, partnership, and a life lived on her own terms. The cost had been high. The choices brutal, the transformation complete. But standing there in Lorenzo's arms, watching the empire they'd built together spread across the city like a promise carved in stone and blood, Isabella understood something fundamental. Some people spend their entire lives pretending to be smaller than they are. Safer. More acceptable. Isabella Vasilev had stopped pretending, and she'd never been more alive. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last shadows of her old life. Below them, the city pulsed with 10 million separate stories of compromise and surrender and quiet desperation. But this story, her story, ended differently. Not with rescue or redemption or return to innocence, but with a woman standing beside the man she loved, claiming the life she'd chosen, refusing to apologize for becoming exactly what she was always meant to be. A queen who earned her crown through fire. A partner who matched her king's darkness without being consumed. A survivor who understood that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let the old version burn. Isabella Sinclair had died in a snowstorm outside a Christmas gala. Isabella Vasilev was born in the ashes, and she ruled her empire without regret, without apology, without ever looking back at the woman she used to be. This was her ending, her beginning, her choice, and she'd made it willingly, eyes open, heart certain, soul intact despite everything people assumed she must have sacrificed. The greatest victory wasn't the territory they'd won or the enemies they'd defeated. It was Isabella finally understanding that she'd never needed saving. She'd only needed permission to become dangerous. Lorenzo had given her that permission, and she'd taken it with both hands and built something fierce and unstoppable from the wreckage of everything she used to believe about herself. This was love. This was power. This was survival. And Isabella Vasilev wouldn't trade it for anything. Not innocence, not forgiveness, not the comfortable lies people told themselves about staying small and safe. She'd chosen the fall and discovered she could fly.